Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto met Loki, the god of mischief. Loki has just fallen into a strange world in which he finds magic works in different ways. He is trying to restore what little magic is left in him as well as try to find a way back to Asgard. What he finds, however, is something unexpected that makes him think that maybe he isn't a monster after all, and maybe, this time around, the Allfather would finally be proud of him. Chapter 8, For the Greater Good. Loki doesn't say anything, he just stares at Itachi, who has lost any expression from his face. His eyes are now gleaming red, showing the spiraling Sharingan. Loki leans back on his chair, both hands resting on each armrest. He cocks his head to the side, contemplating Itachi for a long moment. He lifts his chin and his eyes turn cold and emotionless. There is nothing human or warm in the god of mischief's face. The request has awoken some forgotten feelings Loki ignored since he arrived to the shinobi world. Why? It is but a simple question, but it holds everything Loki wants/needs to know. Itachi suddenly sees the power. It is different than the first time he told Itachi he is a god. There is a history behind every gesture. Behind the deepest of the stare Loki is dedicating the heir of the Uchiha clan. There is something in his posture, the way he is holding himself and just staring at Itachi as if he isn't more than a subject, a beggar asking for a favor. Which, if Itachi is honest with himself, he is. You have power. I can see it every time I see you. Itachi turns to Loki. I can see it gleaming in your eyes, in the way you move. So, it is my power what you are looking for? Itachi isn't sure, but he believes he sees some disappointment in those green eyes. It is what I can do what makes you come to me. Loki doesn't know why, doesn't want to know why this revelation hurts. Loki is used to being alone, to not having friends. This never stops him from thinking maybe in this realm he could. It is not only the power. Although, it is a great motivator. Itachi smiles at this, unaware of Loki's thoughts. I've seen you and I know you're the only one I can trust. You're the only real friend I have. Loki is startled. There is a slightly opening of his eyes and an intake of breath Itachi doesn't notice. The god of mischief feels stranger than before and his only reaction is to blink and frown. Itachi then puts his elbows on his knees, holding his face on his hands while letting his Sharingan twirl wildly. And, you're the only one who I think would understand and who cares about Naruto enough to do something. Itachi clenches his fists, lowering his eyes while he mumbles, something must be done, and, I cannot let them live. The fire cracks and suddenly the wood of the house trembles under the pressure of the wind, interrupting Itachi's speech. There is a storm out there, hitting with its full force the small cabin in the woods. A window snaps open, calling Loki's attention. The cold of the weather enters the cabin, making Itachi shiver. Loki stands up slowly. Methodically he approaches the window. A few snowflakes brushes against his skin. He watches while his mind reminds him why he isn't shivering under the cold, why he feels comfortable under it. Tell me, Itachi, why should I help you? Why do you sound eager to kill your kin, your family? Loki closes the window while still facing the outside. The storm is making it difficult to watch anything beyond the smallest tree growing right in front of his window. The trickster hears someone move behind him. He feels eyes on him and then a voice that starts talking. My clan has great ambitions. My father, the leader, has been planning a coup d'état. He plans on destroying Konoha, reformed it and then transforming it into something suitable for the great Uchiha clan. The last part is said with irony and disgust. Itachi is not inclined to hide his real feelings towards the matter. Loki remains silent. He is listening while his mind is processing everything he knows about the Uchiha. Their techniques, why they are called a clan, what is their specialty, what does he know about their history? And what is their relation with Naruto, or more correctly, with the Kyuubi? They have joined forces with some of Konoha's enemies. They have great plans for the rest of the clans in the village and... Then, Itachi trails off and his mouth draws a bittersweet smirk. And, they have great plans for Naruto. Loki tenses, his head tilts back, looking out of the corner of his eye to the figure of Itachi, who is focusing his attention on the fire from the fireplace. I was raised to be one of my father's weapons. Itachi smirks, glancing wryly at Loki. My eyes have always been special. Sharper, stronger than others in our clan. My father has the belief I can obtain the ultimate power of the Sharingan, that I can obtain the power of Uchiha Madara's eyes. The fire crackles and the shadows projected by the movements of the flames creates a mysterious atmosphere. Loki fixates his eyes on the Sharingan, and he watches as Itachi changes from his normal Sharingan to the one called Mangekyo Sharingan. Of course his attempts were a total failure. He read an ancient text but his eyes would get him so far, he would need more than a simple Sharingan to see the rest. But, he didn't know this. Loki frowns because Itachi has this strange smile on his face, as if there is a secret he knows but his father and Loki ignored. I met someone. Or, more correctly, someone met me a few days after my father tried to make me obtain the Mangekyo by his own means. Itachi looks out of the corner of his eyes, he can notice there is some confusion in Loki's expression and Itachi knows he is the only one, at least in Konoha, that has been contacted by this strange man. Who are you talking about? A man, wearing a Sharingan wearing a Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi shakes his head as he keeps explaining. It was strange, I didn't trust him at first and to be completely honest with you, I still don't trust him. He wears a mask and his right eye is the only visible one. Our meeting was planned by him and he made sure to tell me things about my clan I already knew and some others I ignored. Itachi waves his hand. But, the important part is, he told me how to obtain the ultimate power of my eyes and he made me an offer. Loki grabs his chin, his eyes gleaming with understanding but at the same time with the same amount of confusion he showed to Itachi. An offer? Just who is this man? He claimed to be Uchiha Madara himself. Loki raises his eyebrow and Itachi smirks. Yes, I know. I'm not sure his claims are real but, either way, the important part about that meeting was his offer. The Mangekyo Sharingan on Itachi's eyes turn to Loki, swirling slowly as the young man continues his speech. He told me soon enough the village would ask of me the ultimate proof of loyalty. Itachi's smile drops and here he looks actually sad. He told me when the time was right he would help me and then, the two of us, could make the world free of war and hatred we dream of. This time with an Uchiha clan looking for peace and order and not war and chaos. What about your father? Does he know you have the ultimate eye technique? Asks Loki interested in Itachi's answer. Father never understood the real power or the real means to obtain this power. Itachi lowers his head, his lips drawing a sad smile. His mind was only in the ultimate and in what the power of the Mangekyo could give him. He doesn't care about me, or Sasuke. He doesn't care about the village or even the clan. He only wants power and I am the mean to hold that power. Itachi clenches his jaw stopping for a moment before continuing. He believes I am his tool to use and get hold of the most powerful weapon Konoha can dream of. The Kyuubi. Naruto. Mumbles Loki to which Itachi nods. Yes, he knows the eyes of Uchiha Madara are capable of controlling the creature. Now, imagine you gain this control not only over the creature but of the human form holding it inside. Itachi shakes his head. Some people are ready to kill Naruto if we give them the chance, but there are others that wouldn't harm him. He is a kid and many now he is the son of the fourth Hokage. Either way, father wins and Konoha loses. You decided you cannot take any risk, so you will destroy your clan. Asks Loki when Itachi falls silent. You will destroy your clan for only one man. It wasn't me. It turned out this man, this Madara, was right. Itachi exhales with resignation while speaking. The Hokage and the elders of the village decided my clan should be exterminated before they start an unnecessary war. Besides, you and I both know I would kill my father on my own if he was the only problem here. Itachi stares at Loki. Many in my clan are already planning, they are ready to strike the moment father tells them to. Why do you think I'm part of the Umbuko pairs? Because I'm supposed to be their spy. No. This year is going to be blood and it is up to me to decide if it's going to be the innocent blood of the villagers or the blood of my clan. Loki observes Itachi knowing the young man is right. If Itachi's father was the only problem here, Itachi would have no problems dealing with him. One way or another. He has come to realize Itachi is practical and hates the unnecessary sacrifices pointless missions leave behind. Loki notices Itachi shivering but he knows it's not because of the cold. The place is warm enough. Suddenly, the Mischief god glances down at his hand. He always thought the lack of cold was because of his heritage as an Aesir, there is an ironic smile on his lips. Now he knows what kind of heritage allows him to be out in the cold without being affected. A monster. What's this? The reason Itachi has come to him. I came to you because if there is anyone who can help me, it's you. Loki turns confused and suddenly he realized he has spoken out loud. I don't know where you came from or why you're here. This time Itachi stands up and approaches Loki. But I do know that you have powers beyond my reasoning, and if I want to save those who are innocent, then you're my last hope. Loki tilts his head, watching Itachi with old, wise eyes. There is time inside those green orbs, there is a story behind them that speak of pain and rejection, of war and lost. Loki is now wide open to the prying eyes of Itachi, and then Itachi sees the god behind those eyes. I came because I know you have the power to help me, Loki. I didn't come here for you to use you as a weapon, I came here because you're my friend. Loki doesn't know what to say, he doesn't know how to react. This is the second time Itachi says this, and the god of mischief doesn't know how to answer to that. He feels dumbstruck and confused. He turns around and goes directly to the small kitchenette, still trying to conceal any emotion that may have come to the surface. Would you like some tea? Itachi is caught off guard. He is expecting an answer, instead it comes a tea invitation. He shrugs. It's cold outside, he still feels cold and his mind is a war zone. Yes, that would be nice. It is after a short meal with a heavy silence hanging over their heads that they resume their conversation. Loki has had enough time to think what to answer. He has enough time to consider all the options and their consequences. Finally he looks up and shakes his head. You came here claiming I'm your friend and acknowledging my powers. Itachi stares at Loki intently. You are correct in your assumption that I could help you in destroying your clan without so much of an effort from my part, but you're mistaken if you think your reasons are enough for me to destroy a whole clan. After a moment of silence, Loki merely shakes his head. That's not me. Not anymore, anyway. Itachi doesn't ask about the "not anymore" comment. He knows there must be a pretty interesting story behind it, but for now he is more interested in Loki's answer. Then Loki turns to Itachi and shrugs. I guess you lost your time coming here. Not really. Itachi smiles, and there is something strange about his smile, making Loki wary of something. I'm glad I could count on you. I told you you're the only one who can help me save those who are innocent. You are quite the character, Uchiha Itachi. For some reason I feel played. Not all, please. Itachi waves comfortingly, smiling easily. You say you won't help me kill my whole clan, and I'm glad by it. Then help me save them. At least those who deserve to be saved, and get rid of those who only want to see the shinobi world burn. Loki arches an eyebrow but waits for Itachi to continue, because, maybe if you don't want to help me kill them, maybe you would help me save some of them. This time Loki feels his eyes narrow. Intrigued, he leans forward and lets his eyes pierce Itachi. Very well, you have my attention now. Speak and tell me what you should have the moment I came here. 3 weeks later. When Loki goes back to Konoha, he discovers something he thought impossible. Naruto is sick. Apparently the boy has been out playing with Sai and Shin all weekend, even though there has been rain and a high amount of training from Naruto's part. But, by the expression Jiraiya is wearing, Loki knows something else must have happened for Naruto to be on his bed with a high fever and a terrible cough. The boy is happy to see Loki, as he always is, and Loki returns Naruto's smile with a tense one. What happened to you, Naruto? The curious thing about Naruto's reaction is the way his eyes decide to evade Loki's. It was cold and I spent all night outside playing with Shin and Sai. Naruto's voice is dry, it sounds raspy, and the blonde winces with the pain he feels on his throat while speaking. Really? Are you sure you don't want to tell me anything else? Loki raises an eyebrow, but Naruto clenches his lips and shakes his head, hidden under the covers. Soon after, he is fast asleep. Jiraiya approaches Loki from behind, shaking his head while making sure there is only one window ajar. Loki turns to the man, dropping the illusion and putting the scepter out of thin air. It comes as a surprise to the Sun when he sees Loki in full battle gear. Going somewhere? He asks, to which Loki only stares at him for a long moment until Jiraiya fidgets nervously. No, I was just wondering how someone like Naruto could get this sick. Tilting his head to the side, Loki arches an eyebrow at Jiraiya. Care to explain this to me, Jiraiya? The Sunin winces because he doesn't want to say anything. It is something Naruto made him promise and he doesn't feel comfortable with breaking his promise to the boy. It's slightly complicated. Loki makes a sound of impatience and Jiraiya hurries to explain. You see, what Naruto said, it's true. He was out with those rude boys and was playing until he came home all wet and cold. Jiraiya explains how the boys decide to just go out and train and play under the rain, then to go and swim because it was the most logical thing to do. But, after that, well, Naruto had been training with me. He is doing this special training he made me promised not to say anything about it. Not even me. There is a dangerous edge on Loki's voice. Jiraiya chuckles, scratching the back of his head. No, especially you. Loki frowns and allows Jiraiya to continue. You see? What he's been doing is to show you what he can do. It's complicated, but he ended up more exhausted than he thought he would be. Suddenly, Naruto wakes up breathing hard. There is cold sweat rolling down his forehead and back. His whole body is arching, hurting, and trembling as the night wind hits his warm arms and face. Suddenly he feels something cold but refreshing against his forehead. Lifting his eyes, he finds himself staring into deep, green eyes. Loki smiles softly while pressing Naruto gently towards the bed. That's okay, Naruto. Sleep. Loki's voice is soothing, comforting. Naruto opens his eyes, barely seeing the form of Loki beside him. I have a nightmare. It hurts to speak. He coughs and winces in pain. It's just the fever. Go back to sleep. Naruto mumbles something intelligible and then goes back to sleep. Jiraiya appears from behind Loki wearing a worry frown. Loki places another wet cloth on top of Naruto's forehead and starts singing in a language Jiraiya does not know. He has been pushing himself too hard lately. Mumbles Loki, turning to look at Jiraiya. He has been trying the summoning again, am I correct? What else has he been trying to learn? Jiraiya stays still. He confronts Loki's stare but says nothing. Loki arches an eyebrow, looking slightly annoyed while standing up. He approaches Jiraiya and the Sunin feels like a prey ready for slaughter. For your own good, Jiraiya, I hope Naruto isn't trying anything dangerous. Jiraiya gulps, shaking his head, a nervous smile drawing on his face. Not at all. He is just pushing himself too far. Jiraiya chuckles and takes a step back. But, don't worry, I'll make sure he doesn't do it again so he doesn't end up with a cold again. I will hold you to that. Loki turns to Naruto. The boy has a red nose. His face is wearing a soft tinge of red due to the fever. He is shivering and mumbling in his sleep. Sometimes he would sneeze or cough, some others he would curl up and shiver. Loki has never seen Naruto sick and it makes him feel useless to not have something to calm the illness in Naruto. There is movement outside of Naruto's window. There on top of another building is a lone figure. It is standing on top of the ceiling, kneeling slightly with the light of the moon right behind it. Loki's green eyes focus on the figure and he knows it is time. Loki thinks about what's about to happen. He knows things won't be the same. He is about to reveal his real face in all his glory, no shape-shifting and not wearing others' faces. For this to happen, Loki is going to be Loki. He waves his hand and suddenly, without any warning, Jiraiya drops to the floor deeply asleep. Are you sure you have to do this? Itachi is beside Loki in the blink of an eye. He has worry marks on his face while his red eyes focus on Naruto. Believe it or not, Itachi, my strength is not what it used to be. Something is tampering with my power. At this, Loki closes his mouth and sits beside Naruto, placing his hand on the boy's stomach. This won't take long, and when this is over we both can go and take care of your clan. Itachi nods and steps aside, watching with certain fascination as those green eyes gleam in the darkened room and the seal on Naruto's stomach is now visible to the Uchiha's eyes. Loki soon finds himself in a familiar setting. The sewer hasn't changed one bit, it is as it was all those months ago. He takes a few steps forward, hearing the echoes of his footsteps as he moves closer to the entrance. It doesn't take long and the sight that greets him is something that brings a half smirk to his face. Well, look at this, a mighty creature defeated by a simple cold. The god of mischief approaches the cage with amusement written all over his face. The creature lifts his head and growls, annoyed but do nothing else. Go away, little god. The voice sounds strange, There is a slightly raspy tone in it, and it looks painful for the Cuba to even talk or try to remain as annoyed as he seems to be. Oh, and miss the chance to see this extraordinary scene? Never. The Cuba opens his mouth to growl and reply when a loud sneeze escapes him. He looks mortified, whereas Loki looks amused. I would rip you to pieces. Kurama sneezes again, lowering his head, conforming himself to glare at Loki. But, I am not in the mood. Loki snorts, then proceeds to lean against the cage, raising an eyebrow and watching the pitiful sight in front of his eyes. Kurama's amber eyes move slowly to the scepter Loki is grabbing on his right hand. The blue gem is gleaming dangerously, and the Cubia's eyes open slightly in comprehension. No, you certainly aren't. Loki plays with the scepter, observing carefully while speaking. I didn't know Biju could get sick. We don't. The Cuba winces and lowers his head, narrowing his eyes at Loki. This idiotic child has more influence on me. It's embarrassing to have such a pitiful mortal affecting my being in such a way. Kurama growls, but rests his head in a comfortable position to keep watching Loki and stop the pulsating headache. The god of mischief doesn't say anything but merely ponders about the Cubia's words. The seal, he knows it, works to feed Naruto the Cubia's chakra, but, if this creature is affected, could it be possible for Naruto to affect him as well? What other things can be possible? He will need to see the complete notes of Naruto's father after this is over. Tired of the silence, Kurama speaks again, this time showing in his voice the tiredness he feels. What has brought you here, son of Odin? You have not come since you stole from me a minimal part of my power. Then, as an afterthought, I hope you haven't come here to ask me to cure the boy, for I cannot fight against this mortal sickness. Besides, the boy just needs time to recover, it won't kill him. Loki shakes his head, placing the scepter on the ground. The Cubia's amber eyes follow the form of the object, and suddenly he feels it. The small, invisible connection between the power of the god and his power. The Biju smirks, knowing exactly why Loki is there. No, I'm not here for that. I know Naruto will recover, he is just not used to this kind of affliction. Loki places his hand on top of the blue gem of the staff. No one can die from a cold. Well, you never know. I've heard some stories. How can you hear stories lock up here? Asks Loki, genuinely confused. Kurama growls but doesn't answer. Tell me quickly what you want and be over with it. I'm tired and want to sleep. Fair enough. Loki looks directly into Kurama's eyes and starts speaking. There's been some development. I need some of the power you can provide me. What, no stealing this time around? No, this time I thought more politely to ask first before doing so by force. If necessary. Loki speaks calmly with an undertone of warning on his voice. Kurama chuckles, swinging his tails back and forth. I see Odin has failed to teach you any manners, but, then again, the old man was just as impetuous and arrogant in his youth. I'm not here to speak about the All-Father's youth or his actions. Loki replies with a strange look on his face. I'm here to take from you something I need. Kurama watches and sees there is something different in Loki. The first time he merely took it without so much as a long conversation. Now he seems doubtful, as if he is still thinking what he is about to do. Cuba knows of the affection Naruto has for this god. He knows the boy is ready to do anything for him, and, whether he likes it or not, Cuba feels Naruto's feelings deep inside himself as well. Without a warning, one of the tails moves to place itself on top of Loki's hand, and suddenly the god of mischief feels a surge of power going through his hand to the scepter. I have a feeling this going to turn out interesting. The Cuba smirks as Loki's eyes change from green to red. Let's see what you can do with some of my power, Loki Odinson. Uchiha Sasuke is a normal boy with a very complicated life. In all his short life he has only wanted to please the most important people in it. His big brother, Uchiha Itachi, and his father Uchiha Fugaku. In Sasuke's eyes those two are the most powerful and amazing shinobi Konoha has the privilege to have. On many occasions, and with the company of his mother, Sasuke wonders why his father isn't a Hokage. Why their clan seems to be only in charge of the police force and not something like the Umbu Corps or some of the special Jonin. The Uchiha clan is born to be great, to be the best, or so his father has been telling him all these years. His mother would only shrug and tell him it could be because Konoha isn't ready for the Uchiha to be the ones to rule them. Sasuke thinks this is stupid because the Uchiha is the best clan in the village. He has heard his father speak numerous times with his friends and his uncles and the rest of the family about this. Sasuke knows his father has great plans and that it is just a matter of time for them to take good care of Konoha and lead it to greatness. But, for now, the only job Sasuke seems so keen to accomplish is to make Itachi and Fugaku proud. For that he has been training like crazy, even more so since his father taught him the fire jutsu, and Itachi has been joining him all afternoons in special training sessions for the last few months. Of course, Sasuke seems rather upset by the idiot's participation. The one called Uzumaki Naruto, the boy is a disgrace to the ninja world, but Itachi, for some unknown and crazy reason, seems to be attached to the boy. Well, not for too long. As soon as Sasuke shows them he is the better fighter, Itachi would, once more, return his complete attention to him. It is a cold and quiet night. Sasuke walks late at night towards his district after an afternoon of training and spending some time of his own at the other side of the village. He doesn't notice is late until he hears his stomach growls. Sasuke is half worried and half happy. Worried because his mom is going to scold him for being so late, happy because he finally got a handle of the fire jutsu and the next day he is going to show it to his father and his big brother. That's why he never notices the lack of sound, the lack of light or life the moment he crosses the threshold of the compound. Sasuke doesn't notice the shadows projected by the lonely buildings or the one following him close behind. It isn't until he is crossing the main street leading to his house that Sasuke finally noticed something is wrong. Usually the front door belonging to his home is adorned with two lanterns. One with the symbol of the clan and another one with the symbol of a Sharingan pattern. They are always lit by the time the sun has disappeared. But, not today. Today they aren't lit and the door is completely broken. Sasuke lets his backpack fall to the ground and he runs towards his home. He enters and soon enough his screams can be heard all through the Uchiha compound. Dad. Mom. Itachi. He enters discovering the house is a mess. There are marks of burning left and right. There are some stains of blood and his father's favorite table is broken in half. As he runs through the rooms, Sasuke discovers something blurring his sight. He believes at first it probably is some kind of genjutsu, but soon enough finds out it's his own tears rolling down his cheeks. Dad. His voice is weak and he is trembling when he reaches the last room. He barges in, stopping dead on his tracks. There in the middle of a room is a man, but not any kind of man Sasuke remembers seeing before. It is huge. Taller than his father, who he is holding by his throat. The man is wearing the strangest helmet with golden surface and two curve horns. He has on some kind of armor. Gold, silver, black and green seem to be the main colors dominating this strange clothing. There is also a staff with a gleaming blue gem at the top, and those green eyes are staring back at Sasuke. The young boy, even with his little training as a ninja, is not ready to see this, to face danger and dead so early. He is trembling, tears rolling down when he discovers the dead form of his mother on the floor and the agonizing one of his father's on the man's hand. Dad. He suddenly mumbles and it's surprised to hear his own voice. So weak and fearful. SSA Sasuke. Fugaku grabs Loki's forearm, pushing and pulling without success. Sasuke takes a step backwards, swallowing before speaking in the same weak fearful tone. Let him go. My brother will stop you. Your brother. Loki smirks, taking a step forward. Fugaku groans in pain. Sasuke clenches his fists and tries to move forward, but the fear has him paralyzed. Whatever makes you think I haven't killed him already, boy? Hearing this breaks something inside Sasuke. It is a sudden awakening, something that clicks inside the young Uchiha's head. Sasuke screams in pain and anger and launches himself against Loki. The god of mischief erases any kind of expression from his face and tosses the body of Fugaku against Sasuke. The boy trips and falls down with his father to his left. Sasuke is lying defenseless, watching with big, black eyes the figure of Loki approaching him. Nearing with each footstep. Fugaku chuckles and throws something at Loki, but Loki grabs it with his hand and tosses to the other side. One last trick before saying goodbye, Uchiha-san. Loki shakes his head. You bastard. Fugaku grimaces and coughs blood. You won't be a problem anymore, Uchiha-san. Be grateful. I think your son still has a chance to be redeemed. Loki spares Sasuke one last glance and leaves. Sasuke is there, trembling, crying, feeling useless until a hand grabs his. Turning around he sees the dying form of his father. The man is smiling weakly, there is blood everywhere and Sasuke sits down and leans over his father's body. The man grabs Sasuke's hand as hard as he can. Didon't failed me, make me proud, Sasuke. Dad. Dad, please. Sasuke cries as Fugaku closes his eyes breathing weakly as the time passes. Dad. Wake up. I'll bring the doctors and you'll be okay. No time. Fugaku coughs again and moans in deep pain, his breathing is getting heavier, slower. Just, remember. Those are the last words of Uchiha Fugaku to his youngest son. Sasuke feels as the hand becomes colder and motionless in his. He sees the light leaving the black eyes of his father and the chest stops moving. There is silence for a moment, then Sasuke lets out a soft whining sound. And falls on his father's chest crying uncontrollably. His hand is trying to embrace the dead figure of his father when suddenly grasps something. His katana. Sasuke grabs it, lifts it, and with his features twisted in pain and decision he stands up and runs towards the door. It is done. The voice of Loki is cold and hard like steel. Itachi nods but doesn't ask or say anything else. They're about to turn around when someone comes running at them. Loki lifts the scepter and stops the sudden attack. He can see the rage and hatred in that childish face, the tears, and the blood that isn't his but that it's making he feel more alive than anything. Itachi sees as his little brother tries to harm Loki with his sloppy but decisive strikes. Die. Die. Loki blocks, turns and takes the katana from Sasuke's hand. He pushes the boy with the end of the staff making him fall to the ground. Before Sasuke can stand up, the god of mischief presses the scepter against the chest of Sasuke holding him down but unable to stop the struggling from the boy. I will forgive your life for 3 reasons. The first one, I understand the pain. You just lost someone dear to you and you think me the one to blame. Sasuke spits and screams but Loki's voice is loud enough for the boy and Itachi to hear. Second, because someone asked me to spare you as you're still young and the corruption hasn't touched you entirely. And thirdly, because I don't kill kids. Sasuke stays still and just when Loki stops the pressure and turns to leave, the young Uchiha screams and throws himself forward, raising his fist to hit Loki. The man merely sidesteps and Sasuke falls on his face. When he lifts his face, he sees another figure right in front of him. Hope returns to his heart but it's soon forgotten when he notices the look in those blood-red eyes. Itachi. That's enough, Sasuke. The voice, deep and menacing, sends shivers down Sasuke's back. He stands up, but can barely hold himself as he takes a step back and his back hits against Loki's form. He turns around and jumps looking from one man to the other, confused and terrified. Itachi lowers his eyes and Loki can see the conflict in them. He raises his staff and points it at Sasuke. Do you want me to take care of him? Sasuke lifts his head fast and hard, his eyes growing big. Itachi shakes his head and Loki turns around and leaves. What? Itachi? What's going on? Itachi. Dad is dead, I know. Itachi's Sharingan suddenly change and Sasuke can't look away from the form of the Tomos. You should have stayed in the training grounds, Sasuke. What's happening, Itachi? Tears are blurring Sasuke's eyes. He feels a heavy headache on his head, something making him dizzy and weak on the knees. Someday you'll understand, Sasuke. Itachi grabs Sasuke and makes him look directly into his eyes. Tsukuyomi. Loki shakes his head hearing the sudden scream coming from the little boy. He takes another step forward and places his scepter on one of the women Itachi left unconscious. The staff gleams with intensity before it extinguishes and the woman is not there anymore. The next day the villagers wake up to turmoil. They see ninja left and right, all of them running with an urgency they haven't seen since the Kyuubi's attack. It is then when the smell of burning wood, stone, grass, and cloth fill their nostrils and their heads turn to a huge fire right in the middle of the Uchiha district. The Hokage watches as young Uchiha Sasuke rests on a bed in the hospital sustaining some minor burns, high fever, and hallucinations. The old man lowers his head, a sad expression crossing the aged facade while his hand closes tightly around the piece of paper left behind by one Uchiha Itachi. It is done. For the village, for my little brother. Remember your promise, Hokage-sama, for I shall not forget mine. Chapter 9, The Growing Darkness. The aftermath of the massacre was something no one expected. However, one could say the most surprised of them all were the elders of Konoha. It was pretty obvious what had happened to the Uchiha clan could not be ignored and couldn't be treated as a simple threat. This was a war declaration made to the village and its power. Whoever had done this was trying to send a message, that they could do this whenever they wanted. Danzo was the first one jumping in, trying to gather the most reliable source of information about the night in particular. The problem was, when he was ready to label Uchiha Itachi as the perpetrator, the few witnesses they could gather say something unexpected. He was strange. He had this huge helmet with horns, all gold and green. He just looked at me and suddenly I was unconscious. I don't know. I've never seen the guy before, but I've heard of him. Lysmith. But the only one who could actually give some light to this matter was Sasuke, and even his answer was confusing and worrisome for Sarutobi and the rest of the elders. The boy was confused, tired, but most of all frantic and slightly demented when he spoke with Sarutobi and the others. My brother didn't do it. I think he was being controlled. Yes. That's it. That man, he killed my family, he took my brother away. After these declarations, it was obvious Konoha couldn't label Itachi as a missing nin without taking into account what Sasuke had said about him. It would be too risky to just mark him when there was more than one eyewitness coinciding with the same details of the attacker. Konoha decided then to put a picture of the man they all recognized as the murderer of the Uchiha clan and the possible kidnapper of the eldest son. But, of course, Itachi was also wanted, if only for an interrogation that would prove his innocence. The turmoil wouldn't pass any time soon. Other ninja countries would try their luck and test Konoha's strength, some others would just analyze and watch from afar. Besides, there were more forces in the world at play, forces lurking in the dark and growing in strength, waiting. And the time for them to act was coming closer. 4 years later, Naruto looked himself in the mirror. His face was expressionless as he took in the baby fat still decorating the edges of his face. Those blue eyes sparkling as they looked back at him, his mouth twitched in a half smirk while his hair, longer than it should be, fell on top of his eyes. He had grown up, indeed, from the little boy who Loki had found so many years ago. Now, he was becoming a teenager and soon he would be a full-fleshed shinobi. The blonde fixed his vest and tied his hitai around his neck, making sure everything was in place, his kunai holster, his daggers, and the vambraces Loki had given to him for his birthday. Once again, Naruto took his hand to his forehead protector. Should he wear it on his forehead or let it around his neck? Ugh, would stop trying that out? You've been playing with your hitai since it was given to you. Just put the damn thing on a visible part of your body and let's go. We're gonna be late. Again. Pointed outside from the corner he had been reading, Shin was looking ready to drag Naruto by force, if necessary. Naruto turned around, flashing them a half smirk as he tapped the silver plate with his thumb as he, once again, changed it to place it around his forehead. Hey. I've to look good. Today we're officially shinobi. I'm a step ahead to become a hunter nin and then Hokage. You're a step ahead to stop being an idiot and probably become smarter than the average slug. Naruto glared at Sai, who dedicated him his best smile. Shin could only roll his eyes, for this was an old argument between them. No cool, Sai. No cool. Naruto shook his head while heading to the door. He placed his hand on the doorknob, stopping for just a moment. This new step he was about to give was filled with a meaning neither Sai nor Shin understood. Today, just as Loki had pointed it out, he was becoming an adult. He was reaching the portals of adulthood, in which case, Loki would give him two things, answers and training. Something he has been demanding since he found out Loki was behind the Uchiha massacre. Naruto? Shin asked quietly, not being used to this sudden change in his friend. For Naruto was his friend, after all these years the young man could feel it in his heart. Naruto had become someone important, someone he was ready to protect and follow. Shin looked out of the corner of his eye as Sai frowned, focusing his attention on the blonde as well. What are we gonna do, Sai? What shall we tell Danzo-sama? How can we tell Naruto the truth without hurting him? Sorry. Naruto tilted his head, grinning foolishly at his friends. Is just, after we crossed this door we're officially genin, I'm just excited. Well, if you continue this contemplation we are not going to be anything, it's already past 9. Naruto and Shin turned to Sai, both wearing stunned expression, whereas Sai smiled calmly at them. What? Why didn't you say so? The both of them exclaimed, to which Sai shrugged. You didn't ask. Naruto was the first one out of the door with Shin closed behind and Sai shaking his head. The morning in Konoha was suddenly interrupted by the trio running down the roads, passing through the streets and top of the buildings. Some people would move almost immediately, fearing another prank from the three boys. Some others would look at them with anger and resentment in their faces. They were either victims of some of their pranks or victims of the Kyuubi. Then, there were others who would smile and wave at them. For some, Naruto and company were terrorists led by the Demon Boy, for others they were mere pranksters, the best Konoha has seen since the Daime Hokage. Naruto. Shin. Sai. You're late. Umino Iruka glared at the boys, indicating with his hand the 3 empty chairs at the end of the classroom. Many people would look at them, murmuring, while some of the girls would either smile or blush whenever Shin or Naruto would turn to them. Neji narrowed his eyes the moment Naruto turned to look at him. The blonde raised a hand and with 2 fingers he pointed first his eyes then to Neji as a sign to show Naruto was watching him. The Hyuga frowned, snorting and returning his attention to Iruka. That Naruto? Mumbled Tenten with an amused smile on his face. He is an idiot. Was the only reply Neji had, to which Tenten merely snorted. If she were to guess, and she would never say it out loud, Neji considered Naruto his best friend forever. His only friend, actually. Naruto was the only med/cool enough to be near Neji and not being offended half the time by whatever Neji had to say. There was excited chatter all around the classroom. For a moment Iruka waited for Naruto and company to sit before continuing with his speech. As I was saying before I was interrupted, Iruka focused his attention on the class, who went silent and turned their attention to their teacher. Today it is your last day as academy students. I am really proud of all of you and I hope everything goes well for each one of you. Soon enough the whole class was back to being distracted. They started talking excitedly about the missions, about their teams, who would be their instructors or how many dangerous missions would they get. Iruka could already feel the growing headache, which didn't improve one bit when he noticed Mizuki was sulking on his chair. Whatever had happened to the man? He really seemed worried and pissed at the same time. Iruka shrugged, it wasn't his problem after all. Shut up. The whole class went silent again, and to make sure his words were understood Iruka turned his dark eyes to each one of his students. When he was sure there would be no more interruptions he cleared his throat and continued speaking. Okay, now, let's start with your genin teams. Iruka took a piece of paper from the desk. For a brief moment he noticed the strange look in Mizuki's eyes. A slightly gleam of blue and black. Iruka stopped for a moment, blinking to make sure he didn't see wrong, but then Mizuki's eyes were back to normal. Iruka shook his head, frowning. Well, let's start. For over 20 minutes Naruto spent his time watching carefully the gift Loki had given to him for his birthday. His fingertips touched reverently the soft surface of the blade while following the patterns of the unknown runes. Unknown to some, of course, for Loki had made sure Naruto would recognize them. He still feels butterflies on his stomach every time he read the words. Naruto Lokusen. Naruto couldn't help the smile appearing on his face. The dagger was so masterly crafted and the young boy could sense the magic humming through the blade and the hilt. However, and if Naruto were to be honest, the value of the dagger wasn't in the material or its own power. The real value lied on the person who gave it to him. Loki had told Naruto the dagger was a customary gift, something a father gives a son the moment he passed from childhood to adulthood. The young Uzumaki had a lot of fun making Loki squirm and tried to explain exactly what he meant by father and how that involved him and Loki himself. Naruto also took way too much pleasure in the fact he was looking and behaving like Loki with each passing day. And the dagger, more than a ritual of adulthood and parenthood, was a symbol. A promise, a chance of a new family. Something Naruto took without thinking twice, even after all the terrible things he heard people whispering about Loki. Even after Loki himself told him some of those things were true. Team 10 Hyuga Neji, Rock Lee, and Tenten. Your Jonin instructor is Might Guy. That brought Naruto back to the situation at hand. He turned around only to see the strange, sympathetic smile Iruka directed the newly formed Team 10. It seemed as if Neji and Tenten also noticed it, for them were glancing back at the other with dread in their eyes. Shin snickered while Sai snorted. Naruto turned to them frowning slightly. He was about to ask about this reactions when he felt Iruka's eyes on him. Turning around, the blonde gave his teacher his most charming and innocent smile, to which Iruka merely rolled his eyes. Finally, Team 11 is composed by Uzumaki Naruto, Shimura Sai, and Shimura Shin. Your Jonin instructor is Uzuki Yojeo. No sooner had Iruka stopped talking than the room started its exited humming again. Iruka opened his mouth but in the end decided against it. Every single one of them joined their respective teammates, talking animatedly about their oncoming meeting with their Jonin instructors. It is such a shame, Naruto-kun. I was really looking forward to working with you. Naruto smiled at Lee, shrugging. I know, Lee. I know. It would have been awesome, the two of us becoming legends. Naruto wrapped his arm around Lee's shoulder, his free hand drawing an arch as he spoke. Lee and Naruto, the awesomest team in Konoha. I don't think awesomest is even a word, Uzumaki. Naruto turned to glare at Neji, who was looking at him with a condescending stare. Then again, your vocabulary is so limited, I'm not even surprised about it. Humph, you're just mad I beat you in the taijutsu exam. Don't worry, Neji Hime, you'll get better as you grow up. Neji twitched, but soon enough he looked horrified as Naruto winked at him, blowing Neji a kiss. Tenten rolled her eyes. Lee was torn between being fascinated and confused. Shin laughed and Sai preferred to not get involved. Neji, apparently, didn't take lightly the comment and stood up, grabbing Naruto by his jacket and bringing the boy closer to his face. Naruto for his part smirked, still amused, and this only made Neji angrier. Oh, Neji, here? In front of everyone? But, so soon. Naruto taunted. Neji felt his anger grow as he narrowed his eyes. There was something about Uzumaki that seemed to always thick him the wrong way. I'm going to fix that face of yours, Uzumaki. By now, the rest of the class was pretty much paying attention to the discussion. For them, Neji and Naruto were the source of the most epic battles, well, Neji and Naruto and the last of the Uchiha. Perhaps, the only difference relied in the fact that whereas Neji and Naruto didn't have a fan club, the Uchiha boy seemed to have a bunch of rabid girls following him everywhere. This usually made those fights slightly annoying for some. Oh, what a youthful group of genin you have here, Iruka. The loud voice coming from a newcomer made the whole class turned around. There, dressed in a horrible green jumpsuit, was this man smiling brightly at the students while the rest of the Jonin teachers eyed him with amused smiles. Now, tell me, Iruka, which ones are going to become my dear students? Iruka smiled sympathetically at the group, and Neji had a sinking feeling that today wasn't just going to be his day. Iruka waved to his students and stared directly at Neji, Tenten and Lee. Here is Team 10, Hyuga Neji, Rock Lee and Tenten. Tenten watched horrified the scene. Lee had tears in his eyes, watching in admiration, and Neji had this darkened expression when Might Guy decided to introduce himself as. And I'm Konoha's sublime green beast of prey. Naruto winced, placing his hand on Neji's shoulder. I'm so sorry, man. I really am. You'll pay for this later, Uzumaki. Was all Neji mumbled, because he could see Naruto wasn't sorry at all and the blonde was enjoying this way too much. Just like that, the rest of the teachers took their respective teams and Naruto was watching with some anxiety the door. Anytime now, their teacher was going to appear and then his life as a real ninja would start. The door opened, but Naruto didn't even lift his head until he felt Sai elbowing him. He yelped, narrowing his blue eyes until he saw the nod coming from his friend. Turning around, Naruto's expression changed from a mildly annoying one to one of interest. His eyes found those of the woman standing at the door. The woman had long, purple hair, with a sharp face and hardened expression. She had on umbu gear with a long katana hanging from her back. For a moment she lifted her right eyebrow, looking unimpressed before turning to Iruka. That's them. Yes. Iruka responded. Behind him, Mizuki leaned forward, focusing his attention on the woman who just spoke. His eyes suddenly narrowed, snorting before resuming his sulking position. There was an awkward moment in which the woman turned to them, staring with boredom at Team 11. Naruto tilted his head, taking in the sudden change of the woman's expression. The hardened corners of her eyes, the coldness reflecting from those eyes, Naruto was already familiar with them. Eyes that spoke of thousand deaths, of harsh missions, of things young Uzumaki has yet to live. She had the same, old, eyes Itachi had. The woman was experienced in her stare, whether she knew it or not, was revealing this to Naruto. The woman frowned, looking from Naruto to Sai and then Shin. Very well, follow me. Her voice was pure command. She left the room soon after, leaving Naruto and Shin blinking repeatedly for a couple of seconds. The three of them looked at each other with excitement and wonder in their expressions. Shrugging, Naruto stood up, placing his dagger back on the holster inside his sleeve and moving to catch up with Yojao. Soon enough the trio found themselves in front of a heavy, metallic door, marked with black bold letters that read, Training Grounds 72. The young woman stood up in front of the door, her eyes examining the three young men in front of her. Naruto stared back at her. He felt anxious and curious. The woman didn't say anything, and this only served to make Naruto slightly uncomfortable. He knew from past experience that when someone looked at him this way, their intentions were far from pure. There was a slightly jerk of the woman's head, and suddenly her stare was on Naruto's friends. Naruto took a step forward when he noticed the sudden gleam of suspicion in Yojao's eyes. Naruto couldn't care less if the woman didn't like him, he didn't care if she was like some of the villagers. What really bothered him was anyone messing with his friends. So, are you gonna talk or what? Shin face-palmed just as Sai shook his head. They counted to 10, so they should give Naruto some credit for waiting so long. Sai turned around and stepped away from Naruto. If the blonde was about to get hit for his insolence, Sai would prefer to not be in the near vicinity. He still remembered what happened last time he didn't move. Instead of answering with some form of violence, Yojao smirked with her eyes gleaming dangerously. Yojao discovered, in the little time she had known her future team, Uzumaki Naruto was pretty much like his mother. Outspoken, confident, a little rude, not afraid to voice what was on his mind, and with little patience. Still, there was also much of his father in him. The looks were a sure giveaway, but there was also that something he kept hidden in his mind. If it weren't for the way his eyes gave him away, Yojao would be sure the blonde was naive and a fool, but there was intelligence and slyness in there. In few words, Naruto was unpredictable. Uzumaki Naruto does what he wants, and this little fact made him both dangerous and a great ninja. Impatient, I see. Yojao's smirk grew. Naruto narrowed his eyes, unsure as to how to deal with her. Let's start then. My name is Uzuki Yojao. I was a former Umbu captain but decided to give education of the younger generation a try. See if I can turn a bunch of punks in real ninja. Why would you do that? Shin seemed utterly confused at the revelation. Yojao shrugged. Why not? You'll be the first team I ever trained, and I'm gonna make sure you're the best of the Genin's teams out there. Yojao then pointed behind her. Of course, first, you have to pass the test and prove to me you deserve to be a Genin. What do you mean? We're already Genin, lady. Naruto replied, pointing at his headband. See? That doesn't prove anything. To become a real ninja you have to pass a personal test from your Jonin instructor first. Naruto frowned, crossing his arms. Are you sure this isn't a scheme of some kind? I'm pretty sure. Yojao smiled at the looks on the three boys' faces. But cheer up, even if you don't pass there is always next year. The hell it is. Naruto jerked his arms forward, and out of his sleeves appeared two different daggers. He made a rolling and turning of them on his hands and set them in an attack position. What do we have to do then, Umbu-san? Yojao didn't look impressed. The Sandaime Hokage and Jiraiya had warned her about his. Naruto usually had mood changes. Sometimes he seemed pretty conscious about them, some others it seemed as if the boy hardly thought what he was doing. And yet, Yojao wasn't sure which was this time around, for she was starting to get a real headache trying to guess what Naruto was about to do and how to get a nice control of the situation. The moment Naruto prepared for an attack, Sai and Shin moved slightly, both of them in the background at each side of the blonde, ready for whatever Yojao may do. Yojao arched an eyebrow, impressed. They already knew how to work as a team. Good, one thing less to teach them. Let's see if they can apply it in a combat situation. First, you'll have to trap me. And I mean trap me, not giving me an option but to surrender. Yojao pointed behind her once more. This is a dangerous training ground and you'll have 3 days to catch me. In there you'll find things to eat and drink and you'll have to demonstrate you're capable of more than classroom activities. Naruto smirked along with Shin. Sai seemed mildly interested. Yojao decided there and then there was no more time to lose, so, before either of the boys could say or do anything, she started her attack. They didn't see her coming. Naruto only felt the heavy contact of a fist against his cheek. Sai felt a sudden pain on his abdomen and Shin lost his balance when a knee hit his chest. The 3 of them fell to the ground and, by the time they recovered, Yojao was gone. Naruto stood up, massaging his face, his eyes wide open in surprise. Did you see that? No. Sai incorporated as well, grabbing his abdomen while eyeing suspiciously the training grounds in front of him. Well, she is an Umbu captain, you don't really expect us to best her? Replied Shin, who eyed Sai out of the corner of his eye. Naruto raised his fist with a feral smile on his face and a strange gleam in his eyes. Then, my dear friends, let's show this lady what the 3 of us can do. Naruto turned around, flashing his enthusiastic expression to both Sai and Shin. The boys could only reply with shakes of their heads. To victory. Naruto was gone in the blink of an eye. Sai and Shin watched him disappear inside the training grounds before turning to look at each other. Does he even understand what we have to do first? I don't think so. Naruto is usually doing things first, and then thinking them over. Shin shrugged, jumping up, standing on top of the railing. Let's go before Naruto gets lost. Or he gets killed. This wasn't what he had in mind for his life. He always thought the All-Father would forgive Thor the way he always did. He never expected for anything to go the way it did. He never expected to fall from the Bifrost and land in a world like this one. But, he did, and now he was spending his energy making this illusion possible. Loki felt the cold wetness of the drop of water hit his forehead. Once he looked up, the water started falling as the storm soon caught up with him. He lowered his green eyes to the ground where the blood of the 2 ninja sent to assassinate him lied still. Out of the corner of his eyes, Loki saw the dark shadow of a person approaching him. There was a mask of a weasel covering the man's identity, but for Loki it wasn't that difficult to know who it was. You seem to be getting more and more attempts on your life. The shadow shook his head, finally standing right behind him. It seems whoever is behind this is getting better shinobi for the job. No one is better than me. Loki turned around, facing the shadow that under the light coming from the lightning revealed dark, ninja gear and a black cloak. Red eyes were staring back at Loki from behind the mask. An ant has no quarrel with a boot. These assassins are nothing more than a joke. Then, why do you sound so nervous? Uchiha Itachi hid the smile behind his mask, but his eyes reveal how much he enjoyed the irritation Loki felt at the comment. Loki let out a snort, pushing past Itachi and walking away, well aware of the older Uchiha following him close behind. I'm not nervous, as you said. However, I cannot deny I feel uneasy. Why? Loki put the hood of his own cloak up on top of his head, stopping enough for Itachi to stand beside him. The rain was by now a storm, the wind was blowing with force, removing anything in its path. The thunder and the lightning would illuminate the valley they were in. A second one was taken away. Loki clenched his fists, a spark of green coming from it. They're getting closer and I'm still wondering who may be behind all of this. Who is taking the Jinchuriki and who knows about me? And, when is going to be Naruto's turn? Loki gave a nod. Itachi sighed, moving to stand beside Loki. Madara wants the Cuba to be the last one we captured. Itachi spoke softly while his eyes search on the horizon for a sign of the sun. What else have you found out about this sculpture you spoke of? Itachi tensed, suddenly remembering the screams of pain coming from the 2 Jinchuriki they captured months ago. He still remembered the vivid colors of green and purple coming from them as the Biju was extracted, then the lifeless bodies of the 2 men after the demons were taken away. He could see Naruto there, suffering the same fate. Then, there was the sculpture. The huge form of 2 arms wearing rings, the 2 purple and green gems glistening with might, giving life to those dead eyes of the sculpture. Whatever this article was, Itachi could feel the power Loki called magic. Nothing beyond what I already told you. However, I call you here because there is something you must know. Loki nodded his head indicating Itachi he was still paying attention. The next target is Naruto's girlfriend. She is not his girlfriend. Loki replied, slowly repeating Naruto's words every time Jiraiya or Loki referred to Yujito as Naruto's girlfriend. When it is happening? In 2 weeks. They're going to hire Kumo-Gakure for a mission in which Yujito would have to be present. Itachi then stood in front of Loki. Yahiko is going to capture her personally. Mainly because they're expecting the Hachiba Jinchuriki to be present. So, they want to capture the both of them. Itachi shook his head. Loki frowned. No, B-san knows how to control the powers of his Biju. It would be highly dangerous to capture him and place its power on the statute before having the others in our possession. They still don't know which gem the Hachiba has inside. Exactly. There was a moment of silence in which Loki contemplated his options. He knew he would need to visit Naruto soon and arranged a meeting with Killer Bee. Loki felt a hand on his shoulder. When he turned around he saw Itachi had taken his mask off and was looking at Loki with his Sharinanda activated. Are you okay with this? Are you sure we should? Yes, I am. You should stop asking me the same thing over and over. Loki smiled and Itachi found it hard to return it. Are you okay? You seem tired. I am, but I'm okay. Once again Itachi put the mask on. Take care of them for me. Loki nodded his head. I will. I'll see you soon. Itachi waited until the illusion finally fell and he was back in the forest. There was no rain and not storm. His conversation with Loki had gone just the way he expected it. There was movement out of the corner of his eyes, but Itachi didn't need to turn to know who it was. So, tell me, Itachi, did he believe you? Yes, he did. When Itachi turned around he found himself face to face with a masked man. One he was pretty familiar with by now. That's amazing. You do have the skills of a real liar, Itachi. I've heard there aren't enough people in the 9 realms capable of tricking the god of mischief. The man moved forward, placing a hand on Itachi's shoulder. He squeezed lightly and Itachi could see the glee in his red, Sharingan eye. Soon, Itachi, our dreams would come true and we will finally have a world without wars, hatred, and unnecessary sacrifices. Not for the first time, Itachi wondered who hid behind the mask and the name of Uchiha Madara. Who was really the man who has been planning the change of the shinobi world for over 15 years? Whatever the answer for that question was, Itachi knew he needed to be prepared to face this man. Itachi knew if there was anything standing in the way, this Uchiha Madara would do anything to take the world with him. Of that, Uchiha Itachi was completely sure. Let's go then. We need to prepare everything before we go against our next target. I thought you say you were a good tracker. Naruto didn't look up, keeping his stare on the ground while ignoring Sai's words. I never said I was a good tracker. I only said I was learning how to be a good tracker. Shin snorted and Sai looked genuinely concerned. So, you mean to tell me you're not as good as you claim to be and we may be lost? Naruto revised one last time the ground before lifting his head and looking directly into Sai's eyes. He was pretty serious with a thoughtful expression that suddenly transformed into one of lack of concern. Yeah, pretty much. Naruto shrugged. Shin chuckled while Sai let himself fall on the ground, shaking his head. I knew it. Oh, come on. It's not that bad. A few meters away, in the highest tree, was Yojeo resting her back against the trunk while listening to the trio. She smiled hearing the conversation between the 3 friends while thinking of her next step. So far the boys had shown her they knew what they were doing. Naruto, apparently, wasn't lying about his abilities as a tracker, something that didn't surprise Yojeo that much. Overall, if she took into account Naruto's dream was to become a hunter nin. Sai and Shin were actually the most difficult to figure out. There was no doubt in the woman's mind those two had been trained by Danzo prior and during their academy time. Their eyes were sharper than Naruto's and they seemed more aware of everything than the blonde. Apparently, Hokage-sama was right, those kids were up to something and that something involved Uzumaki Naruto. Yojeo stopped paying attention to the boys, her eyes lifted to look at the darkening sky. Tomorrow was the last day of the hunt, she better have a good night's sleep before facing them the next day. The morning came faster than she would have liked. Feeling the soft breeze of the morning brush her face, Yojeo opened her eyes to stare at the tree in front of her. Something in the tree, something in the way the wind kept on caressing her face told Yojeo there was something wrong that morning. Yojeo stood up rather quickly, wondering just what had happened with her, even noticing. She took a few steps ahead only to feel a pair of eyes on her. The heavy glare made the hairs of her neck stand up and her body tensed, ready for action. Yojeo smirked, impressed by how fast they had found her and trapped her. There were many things on her mind as she walked carefully, her hand at the ready near her kunai holster. The first thing he thought was about the ability of them to place a genjutsu. There was no denying the academy taught such techniques, but none of them were this advanced. Yojeo couldn't even feel something was wrong. The second thing that made her think was, how and when did they find her? She made sure the three of them were fast asleep before leaving them and going to rest as well. She made sure they were a few kilometers away from each other. And yet, Jiraiya-sama was right. These kids were good and Yojeo would do well and not underestimated them. Yojeo stood up, resting her hand on a trunk and leaning to the side. She watched the empty road to the left, her eyes sweeping over the place before she jumped in and climbed up the tree, looking for some kind of exit, for some kind of response. Yojeo could almost laugh as soon as he jumped, Naruto and Shin appeared from both her sides. Sai must be the one doing the genjutsu. Good, he can't fight then. Yojeo put a kunai from her holster at an incredible speed, stopping just in time the weapon Shin had on his hand. She impulsed herself against Naruto's chest and put her weight on her arm, pushing Shin backwards and making him landed on the ground. Yojeo smirked standing on the trunk, but her smile soon disappeared as she saw three different Narutos coming at her. Bunshin? No, they looked too solid to be Bunshin, but impossible. Yojeo didn't stay to find out if a mere genin was capable of using Kage Bunshin. She evaded the knee aimed to her head and moved down to try and pin Shin to the ground. Shin wasn't there, however, and the woman soon found herself surrounded by at least 20 Narutos. I've got you. Yojeo lifted her head in surprise just as the blonde boy fell on her. The moment Naruto wrapped his arms around the woman, she went off with a puff and white smoke. Naruto growled, laugh reaching his ear from his left side. Good, very good, but it's not enough. I'm still free. Yojeo smiled cockily at the blonde, but her smile disappeared when another blonde appeared to her side, then another and another and another. The smile turned into a smirk. Shaking her head, Yojeo went to disperse the Kage Bunshin with her sword, but the sword moved past them. The Naruto clone smiled, grabbing the woman's end. Yojeo opened her eyes, stunned, never seen this before and clearly shocked as to what just happened. The Naruto clone, grabbing her hand, smiled with an approaching fist towards her head. Yojeo evaded the fist and hit the boy on his stomach, but then the other one, the one he thought was a mere Bunshin, grabbed her by the ankle. Impossible. Where did he learn that? You can't do a solid clone a minute and then an illusion the next, how? Shin didn't make himself wait. Throwing a couple of shuriken, he caught Yojeo's attention, engaging her in a close-range fight. Now, Yojeo was fighting Naruto and Shin at the same time. The woman was really impressed. She had read about them, of course, she knew everything she needed to know about Shin, Sai, and Naruto. But it was apparent the boys hid some tricks under their sleeves from their teachers. She never read the part explaining Naruto's ability to use the Kage Bunshin, or the fact they could use genjutsu, or just how skilled was Naruto and Shin in a close-range fight. Those movements were not academy standard ones. There was experience and hard training behind every punch, every kick, and every evasion. You guys are good, but you have to do better than this. With a quick set of movements, Yojeo sent Shin flying away, only for him to crash against a tree. She grabbed one of the Narutos and sent him down to the ground while dispatching some kunai to the ones who remain. Yojeo landed on the ground just as another 3 Naruto came to her. Suddenly, they stopped and smiled. You're trapped. And then, she understood. She tried to move her feet, but they now were covered by what looked like the dirty ground climbing up his legs. Everything was a trick. And she fell for it. Yojeo felt the trees around melted slowly, taking the form of oil ink and giving way to the real trees hidden behind the illusion. She watched as Sai appeared from behind one of it, brush and a scroll on his hand. Shin came at them limping with a satisfied smile on his face, and Yojeo could see several copies of Naruto still surrounding the scene. The woman shook her head, partially amused, partially wondering just how it turned out like this. She knew there was something strange. She sensed something going on, but, if she were honest, she never imagined something like this. She never thought whatever genjutsu these kids used would be this strange. So, did we pass? Yojao laughed, nodding her head. But even as she did so, her eyes, sharp and cold, were focused on Naruto. With flying colors. Looking in retrospective, Yojao should have said no when she was asked to train a group of genin. She should have screamed no when she was asked to look after Sai, Shin, and Naruto. Yojao looked around the room at the three men looking at her, waiting for her word on the boys and her judgment of their abilities. Perhaps, later in the solitude of her room, Yojao would think about Naruto. About the smile, the way he held himself, how easily the words fell from his mouth, convincing even when those words seemed to be a deception. Yojao believed him. She believed when he told her it was all Shin's idea. She believed him when he told her Sai was the one who came up with the idea of colored ink for his illusions. She believed him when he told her Jiraiya of the Sunin was the one who taught him the Kagebunshin no Jutsu. Yojao merely believed him, even after her instinct told her not to. And now she has to say what she thought of them. Of the son and heir of the fourth Hokage to the very same people who love him as if he was family. So, what can you tell us about them? Yojao shifted, startled by the interruption. She was so deep in thought she almost forgot she had been summoned to the Hokage's office. She lifted her eyes to find herself looking directly into the Sandaime's ones. The young woman was well aware of the others occupying the room. She knew the black eye of Kakashi was focused only on her, and she was aware of the unnerving stare coming from Jiraiya, all of them waiting for her final verdict. Are these kids dangerous for Naruto? How far has Danzo gotten to them? Yojao remained silent, thinking over the question. Were Shin and Sai dangerous? Yes, they were. Pretty advanced for people their age. It was pretty obvious Danzo had bothered into teaching them some of his tricks. Were they dangerous for Naruto? No. They were blindingly loyal to the blonde. If anything, Naruto was the most dangerous of them all. Yojao knew, sort of less, what to expect from Shin and Sai, but she was confused and lost when trying to figure Naruto out. They're good. There is no doubt in my mind Danzo trained them well. The Hokage shot Jiraiya a worried glance, but Yojao noticed the lack of reaction from the Sunin. What about Naruto? Asked the man leaning in. Yojao shifted again, thinking carefully as to what she should say. He is good. No one told me he knew how to perform the Kagebunshin, so that gave him a clear advantage in the test. Wait, he knows the Kagebunshin. This time the question came from Kakashi, who seemed just as confused as the Sandaime. Yojao turned her eyes to Jiraiya, but the man was showing no reaction. Yes, and I said he knows how to use it pretty well. Yojao shook her head. Why didn't you say anything, Jiraiya-sama? Jiraiya. You taught him that jutsu. Jiraiya shrugged. The kid has enough chakra to do so without any harm. Besides, he couldn't do a normal bunshin even if his life depends on it. Then, the Sunin turned to Yojao, and the woman saw a glint of amusement there. Tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how shocked were you at his proficiency with the technique? Yojao snorted, not liking to be taken for a fool or a newbie. The kid is good, but not that much. He still needs a lot to learn. Oh, yes, I agree. Jiraiya smirked, making Yojao glared at the old man. So, I take it you were really impressed. I thought we were here to discuss if those kids from Root were a threat to Naruto. Kakashi intervened, advancing towards the Hokage's desk. Personally, I don't like the fact Naruto is in the same genin team as them. I still think you should have given me the opportunity to take him as my student. No, that wouldn't be any good. You were chosen to try and help with Uchiha Sasuke's training as soon as he graduates the academy, Kakashi. The Hokage turned to stare at Kakashi as he spoke, his voice grave with command. Naruto's grades weren't spectacular, but were enough for him to graduate. I couldn't postpone this, and you know it. Kakashi lowered his head, frustrated, clenching his fist as he controlled his temper. This has always been a sensitive subject for them. In Kakashi's eyes, he had the right to take the only son of his former teacher as his student. It was only right and the best way to return to Minato some of the things he gave Kakashi. If it is any consolation, Kakashi-senpai. Started Yojao, making the former Umbu captain lifted his head to look at her. I think Naruto is going to be okay. He is not what you expected him to be. What do you mean? Asked Jiraiya, letting his eyelids droop a little. Yojao stared into the Sunin's eyes and suddenly she saw a glint of warning there. Yojao then turned her head, wondering just what the hell was really happening before answering. Naruto is smart and I dare to say he is the best fighter of the three of them. This caught the Hokage and Kakashi by surprise, but not Jiraiya, whose lips curved upwards with the hint of a smirk. Besides, like I said, Shin and Sai had developed a sort of blind loyalty to Naruto. Whatever Danzo is planning is not going to work. Or at least, it would be more troublesome than he realizes. Yojao sighed relief once she left the Hokage building. Her eyes lifted to the sky to see the approaching afternoon. She took a step forward when a voice reached her from behind. What did you hide from Sarutobi-sensei and Kakashi, Yojao? The woman turned around to see Jiraiya right behind her. The woman glanced at the Sunin, feeling uneasy for a moment. Whatever you mean, Jiraiya-sama. I told you guys everything. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at the informal talk. He turned his head left and right and then nodded towards Yojao. Follow me. The former Umbu hesitated for a moment, but, in the end, her curiosity won and she followed the man. They soon found themselves on top of the Hokage monument overseeing the village. No one is going to hear us here, so you can speak freely. Yojao wasn't sure what to think. Her heart was beating fast. She felt observed as if there was someone else there, but she realized it was probably the deep, penetrating stare Jiraiya was giving her. So? I know you were dying to say more, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to share it with Sensei, Kakashi, or me. Jiraiya spread his arms. I'm here, so, go ahead. Yojao frowned deep inside her. She knew there was something amiss in here. But, then again, Jiraiya was the one in charge of Naruto. He took it upon himself to look after the blonde and has been doing a decent job recently. I don't know what else can I say that I haven't already said. Started Yojao. She turned to look at the village as she spoke. Maybe, what is bothering me is the fact Naruto seems so advanced for his age. How good he really is when his grades and the general information I got of him told me something completely different. What do you mean? Yojao rolled her eyes. Undisciplined, rebel, average to low grades, gu taijutsu, totally inexistent genjutsu abilities, average ninjutsu, not pretty good with critic thinking or with a fast mind to formulate strategies. Numbered Yojao, lifting one finger each time she mentioned one. Only good for close range attacks and to be on the front as an attack force, not behind the action, planning, and leading. I don't understand, where do you want to go with this? Jiraiya-sama, today Naruto was behind everything. He was the one who planned everything, who put Sai and Shin in the right place, who gave them the strategy. Who? Do you have a proof of what are you saying? Yojao stopped talking, gaping at Jiraiya, who was looking seriously at her. Wait, what? Yojao said, confused. Proof that Naruto seems so adept and different as to how the reports from Iruka and Mizuki described him. Yojao tilted her head and blinked several times. No, I don't. Then, why is it bothering you so much? Why even think about it? Yojao felt sick. She shook her head, opened her mouth but then closed it again. She looked over at Jiraiya and the man, suddenly, smiled gently at her. Naruto is a good boy. He is smart and strong, as you said. Jiraiya turned around and waved to Yojao, leaving his last words in the air for Yojao to think deeply in the meaning behind them. But, Naruto is also a ninja. Don't you ever forget it, Yojao. Jiraiya was very far away when a shadow appeared from behind him. What do you think about this, Yojao? Is she any good? Jiraiya smirked, tilting his head so he could see Loki out of the corner of his eye. Yes, she is already figuring Naruto out. Don't worry, Naruto is in good hands. Where are you? Why do you hide? He ran with his heart beating fast inside his chest, sweat rolling down his forehead. He saw the path ahead of him, a path he didn't recognize, but his mind seemed to think it was familiar. The voice, raspy and deep, filled with malice and laughter, followed him everywhere he went. Why do you run? Why do you hide? There is no escape, you will be mine. There was a cold laughter sending shivers down his spine. He stopped and was facing a huge shadow in front of him, red eyes gleaming deeply in a smirk, a cold evil smirk. I would take back what is mine, and you and that little god of yours will bow before me or perish in a bath of blood. He felt the cold contact of a claw, his head being imprisoned in a tight grasp, and a jolt of electricity and ice pressed his head, making him scream into the darkness. Naruto woke with a start. He felt a sudden headache, cold sweat falling down his forehead while his shirt seemed drenched in the very same sweat. He was breathing hard, feeling suddenly cold and tired, as if he had been running, like in the dream. Naruto lowered his head, trying to recall something about the dream. The face of his pursuer, where exactly was him, but the only thing he could remember was the sound of thunder and the coldness of the hand around his head. This was the 7th time he had the same dream in a month. Each time there was a different detail, a different setting, different people, but the voice was always the same, cold and deep, filled with power and soulless. Naruto frowned, standing up and making his way to the kitchen. He poured some water on a glass and drank all of it in one gulp. "You look awful, did you sleep well?" Naruto turned around with a mixture of surprise and happiness on his face. Behind him was Loki, examining him carefully before placing his hand on the blonde's forehead. "You don't have a fever." "I'm pretty well, actually. Today we finished our 25th D-rank mission." Loki nodded approvingly, his eyes still on Naruto, worry attached to his face. "Don't worry, father of mine. I'm okay, it was a bad dream." Loki tensed, as he usually did when Naruto called him that. He was not used to hearing the word father or dad coming from Naruto. It still felt strange and pleasant, however. It also brought to Loki's mind the memory of his children, the ones he left in Asgard. "What are you doing here, anyway? I thought you were going to be out doing whatever it is you do." Naruto waved his hands in the air while looking at Loki. "You don't have to sound so pleased to see me, Naruto." "Oh, I am. Just surprised, that's all." Loki nodded his head while taking a sit on the closest chair. "I came here to see how it had gone with your new position." "Did you receive my gifts?" "I did. Those daggers are awesome. I'm dying to try them out in a real mission." "Not those D-rank." Naruto shivered at first, then he looked genuinely excited. He smiled widely as he sat in front of Loki. The concern moments ago had plagued his face was no longer there, and Loki had to wonder just what exactly had happened before he arrived. It wasn't like Naruto not to share whatever was on his mind. "Don't worry, soon enough you will be able to show everyone around this place just how good you really are." Loki made sure his displeasure for Konoha filled the tone in which he uttered every word. Naruto usually felt half amused and confused at Loki's animosity against the village. Sure, Naruto himself sometimes felt Konoha wasn't the ideal place to be. People around him were bigots who only saw money, power, and heritage. They didn't take into account the ones who made an effort, who work hard to obtain what they want or what they need. The real meaning of a person was always behind the last name or the deeds he or she did for the village. "There is another reason I have come earlier than promised." Naruto raised a curious eyebrow, his blue orbs following the movements from Loki's hand. Soon enough, there was an envelope coming from the inside of Loki's coat. The god of mischief handled it to Naruto, who took it with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. "I met with a young woman who asked me, promising a painful death if I failed, so, to give you this letter," said Loki dryly while remembering the dead threat coming from Yujito. Naruto chuckled while putting away the letter. Loki smirked when he noticed the sudden blush on Naruto's cheeks. There was a moment of comfortable silence between them. Loki observed and wondered just how long would it take for him to tell Naruto the whole truth. "You should sleep, Naruto. You really look tired." Loki placed his hand on Naruto's shoulder, making sure the blonde was looking directly into his emerald green eyes. "Are you sure you're okay?" Naruto hesitated for a moment. He thought briefly that perhaps telling Loki about his dreams would be a good idea. Maybe he could help him figure them out, but something stopped him. "Nah, just overly motivate with my missions." Naruto shrugged, evading Loki's inquisitive stare. "It's nothing to worry about, Dad." Loki held back his smile, nodded solemnly his head and turned around to make his way to his own room. Naruto stood there for a long time before he too went to sleep. Inside his room, Loki sighed, sitting on the bed with his elbows on his knees holding his face down. "Did you tell him?" The voice of Itachi reached Loki's ears. He kept his face down, his green eyes glaring at the floor. Did it sound as if I told him anything? Itachi took off his mask and sat on the floor. Loki rolled his eyes, sighing, shaking his head. No, I didn't. I couldn't. You have to tell him. Soon, they will come for him and he needs to know. Itachi trailed off the moment Loki turned to him. He felt suddenly cold, pinned to his spot as a green light involved him. Do not dare to tell me what I should do with my own son, Itachi. Loki's voice changed at that moment. There was pain and anger there, and Itachi understood by the slip of Loki's tongue just how much this meant to the god. I'll deal with this when the time is right. For now, be ready. We must save Naruto's girlfriend before he finds out about the oncoming attack. Whatever happened to, she is not Naruto's girlfriend. Loki stood up, rolling his eyes. The moment had passed, but neither of them forgot what had just happened. Do you really believe there isn't any kind of sentiment there between them? No, both seemed smitten enough with each other for the girlfriend reference to work. The god of mischief placed a note on top of his bed before going over Itachi. Loki grabbed Itachi and soon enough the both of them disappeared from Naruto's home. Uchiha Sasuke glared at the trio sitting on the ramen stand. His black eyes gleaming with a mixture of anger and resentment, all of it directed to one person only. Uzumaki Naruto. The young blonde who was smiling and joking, flashing around the Hittite on his forehead while enjoying his meal. The moron who dared to have a peaceful life, to not think of anything beyond having fun, the moron who knew his brother. Sasuke huffed, turning around to set his glare on the plate of food in front of him. Suddenly he didn't feel as hungry anymore. It had been 4 years. 4 years since he was left alone, since he watched his family being slaughtered by the man with the strange clothes. The man he had heard many referred to as the lice myth. After he woke up he was interrogated, over and over. Umbu and the elders of Konoha asked him stupid questions about what had happened. Sasuke told them over and over. The idiots even thought it had been Itachi the one behind the attacks, but Sasuke knew better. The chopsticks he had on his hand broke as Sasuke tightened his hold on them. Putting some money from his pocket, Sasuke threw it on the table and left the restaurant. He heard the voice of Naruto and the black-haired boy couldn't help but feel his resentment grow inside of him. He tried so hard to speak with the blonde after what happened. He tried to make him understand he needed to know whatever his brother may have told him. Because, of something Sasuke was completely sure, Uzumaki Naruto knew something. Itachi spent most of his time with him, so Uzumaki knew something. He had to. And Sasuke would always look for that one chance to make him speak. You look upset. Sasuke stopped suddenly, startled by the sudden interruption. He turned to face the voice and found himself face to face with one of his academy teachers. Mizuki. The man smiled at Sasuke, lifting his face towards the direction Sasuke had come from. You don't seem so fond of young Naruto. Sasuke observed carefully at the man in front of him. Frowning, he tilted his head, not giving an answer for the moment. Mizuki smiled gently at Sasuke, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I get it. You know? I don't like him myself. Sasuke lifted an eyebrow, mildly interested in what Mizuki was saying. The man was still staring ahead of him, frowning. Naruto is the kind of person that signifies a menace to everyone around him. Mizuki then shook his head and returned his attention to Sasuke. But the boy is pretty good. Given time he would become a powerful ninja. I don't care. Sasuke narrowed his eyes. Why are you telling me all this? Mizuki made sure no one was around. He leaned in and whispered in Sasuke's ear. Because, if you want to find your brother or the man behind the slaughter of your clan, you will have to go after Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto turned around confused. He could swear someone was looking at him, but once he turned there was no one there. What is it? Shin turned as well, looking around before focusing on Naruto. I don't know. The blonde went back to their former conversation. It had been 2 weeks since they became official members of the Shinobi Corps of Konoha, and they were already bored out of their minds with the D missions, which was the reason why Yojao got them a C rank 1. Anyway, I'm just glad we got a chance to leave the village. Naruto took another sip from his bowl. Do you know where are they sending us? Nope, not a clue. But, since it's a C rank mission, probably some place that has dealings with us. Nothing too dangerous or far away. Not too far, indeed. Yojeo appeared from behind her students smiling as she sat down beside Sai. Yojeo-sensei. Are you going to tell us? Naruto blinked, battling his eyelashes, to which Yojeo merely shook her head amused. They're sending us to Tsunagakure on an escorting mission. Naruto's eyes opened wide, gleaming with happiness. Really? Who are we escorting? A princess? Some important lord? Who? A scroll. Replied Yojeo, stealing food from her students' bowls. Naruto looked confused. Shin and Sai narrowed their eyes. A scroll. Repeated Shin. You mean, they're sending us on a mailing mission? We're going to be postmen. Sai commented with his voice low and filled with confusion. Yojeo winked at her students and nodded, that's right. But, cheer up. If it serves as any consolation, the Hokage wrote the official letter and needs us to take it to Tsunagakure promptly. But, started. Naruto. Yojeo raised an eyebrow at him, challenging him to speak back at her. Unless you want to keep chasing after Tora the cat. No. The three of them answer at the same time. Yojeo smirked and ruffled each one of their heads. That's the attitude. Go home, rest, and be ready at 4 am on the eastern gate. Yojeo left, leaving her students wondering for a moment. Then after a prolonged silence, Sai spoke first. Wait, Suna is to the other side. This is so going to be a long walk. Chapter 10, The Monsters Our Parents Warned Us About. Fate had a strange way to play its cards. It not always happened the way we expected it to play. It never played the game in a fair fashion. We usually fell for its tricks and our lives end up in turmoil of emotions and circumstances that we needed to overcome. Sometimes these situations are fair, some others they're not. This was one of such times. The mission to Suna had been a success. Yojeo didn't have to worry much when she took her team inside the foreign city. Strange as it may be, Naruto and the others behaved according to their rank and enjoyed the exotic scenery that was Tsunagakure with a curious and open mind. The only thing worth mentioning was the strange meeting between Naruto and the youngest son of the Kazekage, Gaara. Yojeo knew, because of the reports, that the redhead was the carrier of one of the Biju. This worried her as she didn't know how an encounter between Biju would bring. She found herself quite relieved when Naruto didn't react in any alarming way. Still, the redhead observed Naruto in a strange, almost puzzling way, a familiar glint that had put Yojeo nervous and made her move the blonde out of the young boy's sight. As far as anyone knew, Naruto knew nothing about the Kyuubi and it being sealed inside of him. Once outside the city of sand, Yojeo felt even more relief and allowed her students to roam freely ahead of her. If she had known something would happen, she would have never chosen the long way back to Konoha nor let them get away from her sight. It happened on the second day of them returning home. The sky was gray, threatening with storm and lightning. The wind was not blowing, which in itself was strange, but Yojeo was slightly distracted by the sound of Naruto's laugh. She felt her lips quirked upwards, already used to her students' antics. She never felt, not even since the sudden explosion that sent her and the genin flying away, all of them hit square on their sides by the blast. It was a complete surprise for all the presents. As soon as the explosion reached them, Yojeo felt the presence of powerful ninja around them. The fight was ferocious and the young woman tried to stand up to see what was happening. Naruto didn't know what happened. One minute he was joking and talking with Sai and Shin, and the next he felt an unexplained pain on his side, the deafening sound of an explosion on his ears right after he hit his back against a tree. He moaned in pain, opening his eyes to see something impossible. He could recognize Yujito wherever he went. He recognized her purple hair, her slender body, the length of her hair, the blue and silver of her clothes, and there she was, resting her weight on one leg, breathing hard with blood rolling down her forehead and her left arm hanging in a strange position. But, there was something different, something he didn't recognize on her. It was a purplish cloak, a kind of strange energy covering her completely with two tails forming behind her back. Yujito, he said, incorporating. Her name escaped his lips, and at that moment the young girl turned around in complete and sincere surprise. Naruto. It was a brief moment in which their eyes joined, and then Yujito's stare changed from one of surprise to one of pain. You should never take your eyes off of an opponent, Yujito-san. The young kunoichi turned around to see her opponent, the one that had identified himself as Pain, right in front of her, a sword going through her abdomen, blood pouring from her wound as the power she had been using started vanishing. It was out of instinct. He never heard the voices calling for him to stop, he never even paid attention to the other two figures approaching him fast. Naruto merely moved fast, trying to grab Yujito, who had fallen on the tree branch, her hand holding her bleeding abdomen. Yujito lifted her face and saw Naruto, the whisker marks on his face pronounced, his eyes changing slightly from the deep blue to a malicious gold. "Yujito-chan," he said, and the girl opened her eyes in warning. Naruto had enough time to turn around, his daggers on his hand, trying to fight off his opponent. He was feeling rage, his mind wrapped around the fact Yujito had been hurt. The man who attacked him had a ripple-like pattern on his eyes, piercings on his face, orange hair, and a black cloak with red clouds. There was no emotion on his face, his movements were fast and forceful, and all Naruto could feel at that moment was a blind rage. "Naruto!" The blonde heard the desperation in Yujito's voice. He turned around to see a man he had never noticed grabbed her when suddenly another one reached him from the left. Naruto saw as Yujito was hit on the head, leaving her unconscious. She was bleeding, defenseless, and then the blonde realized his friends, his Jonin-sensei and a man he hadn't noticed until then, Killer Bee, all of them were in danger. That was enough for him to snap. Inside the blonde, in the well-hidden cage, yellow eyes gleamed with mirth. The Kyuubi smirked, his tail swinging around as he felt the consciousness leaving Naruto and his own chakra being overtaken by that of the Kyuubi's. Yojao was breathing hard, parrying a kunai directed to her heart. She turned around, lifting her leg and hitting his opponent on the chest. She shivered, feeling the sudden change in the atmosphere. She knew that feeling. She had been but a teen when she first felt it and could never forget it. "Naruto." The name of the blonde left her lips as she turned around and saw, with growing horror, how Naruto was being taken by a red cloak of chakra and two tails started growing behind his back. Loki wasn't expecting this. Not so soon. He moved quickly, running along with Jiraiya as they approached the growing heaviness in the atmosphere. He was ready to save Yujito, if not for himself, for Naruto. But he never thought Naruto would cross the same path Akatsuki, Yujito, and B would be facing each other. It was a miscalculation Loki regretted deeply, and one he would correct with blood, if necessary. He felt it before he saw it, the growing anger and desperation, just as red flames reached his eyes. Jiraiya cursed lowly as he proceeded to put a scroll from under his robes. "Naruto is in danger. I remember this feeling." "The Kyuubi," answered Loki, to which Jiraiya nodded gravely. "The seal is weakening, we must hurry before the damage to Naruto's body is irremediable." As Jiraiya spoke, Loki let his armor wear itself on him, the scepter gleaming blue and green on his right hand and his emerald eyes growing cold as they approached the fight. Wearing Thor's face, Loki took upon himself his brother's ferocious battle expression. It didn't take them long. As soon as they arrived, they saw the complete mess this situation was. Whereas Naruto was fighting off two of his attackers, Yojao, Shin, and Sai were fighting another member of the Akatsuki. Killer Bee was far away from them. His control over the Biju was extraordinary as he fended off two more members of the strange group. Loki's eyes narrowed when he saw another man, one who was holding an unconscious and wounded Yujito in his arms. With a single nod of his head, Jiraiya understood his part in the situation while Loki moved to rescue the young girl. The man, who had short hair, not expression whatsoever on his face, was holding Yujito with one arm and making his way to the forest. Like appeared in front of him, tilting his head and lifting a single eyebrow. The expression in Thor's face looked careless, almost defiant. "I'm afraid this is as long as you will go," he said, holding the scepter in his hand, making the instrument take the form of Mjolnir. The ninja tilted his head, stretching his hand to his opponent. Loki frowned, feeling the suction of the technique. "Mortals and the petty attempts," he said, shaking his head and approaching the young man. This time around Pain's expression did change to one of confusion. Loki smirked, twirling his imitation of Mjolnir on his left hand. With a speed Pain was not used to, he found himself the victim of a hammer blow that sent him backwards. Loki grabbed Yujito carefully, holding the girl in his arms with gentleness. His eyes turned colder as he placed her on the ground, his hand above her body assessing the damage to her body. He didn't even lift his head when the man he was fighting stood up, moving fast towards him. Loki lifted his hand and a green light gleam out of his hand, stopping the man. I don't have time to do this, he said, and suddenly his hand changed of color. It went from a clear skin to one of the deepest blue pain has ever seen. Then everything went cold and he knew no more. Damn! Mumbled B as he evaded another attack with his katana. He moved to the side and found himself face to face with Akanaha Kunoichi. The woman sent him a stern glare and B understood. Soon enough the both of them were defending against attacks when a cry of surprise startled all the presents. Shin couldn't hide his surprise when he saw him. A man in a golden armor with green and black, a scepter on his hand and a helmet with horns. It was the same armor everyone had heard about, and, when looking closer, Yojeo could make out the noticeable features of the man that had been described as the Lie-Smith. Killer B then smirked. He let out a sigh of relief when he saw Yujito had been put out of harm's way. More relaxed, he turned to his opponent and blasted him with one of Hachibia's tentacles. Yojeo frowned. She didn't know what to do. Confused, she watched as the man helped the girl and then proceed to dispatch his enemy in a strange way. Then she saw something else. Naruto had grown another 2 tails, but there, approaching him with 2 toads on his shoulders, was Jiraiya. Just, what the hell is going on? Yojeo had not time to answer her own question, for her attention was brought back to the fight in front of her. What is it, Jiraiya-chan? Jiraiya didn't have to answer, for Naruto's form fell right in front of them, the tails swinging back and forth, and then all of them saw it. Whatever those tails touched, it went rotten, dying right before their eyes. Jiraiya put his scroll out. Biting his lip, he put some blood on it, making fast hand signs, the ink with the seal moving towards his fingertips. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Loki moving fast towards him, his helmet off and determination on his eyes. Naruto was still on a rampage. He was growling, losing himself little by little while fighting off his opponents. One of his tails sneaked around, grabbing one of the panes. The man screamed out in agony as he started rotting right in front of everyone's eyes. Loki frowned, his hand outstretched, sending a green light straight to the other enemy, sending him backwards while Loki centered his attention on Naruto. His emerald eyes fell on Naruto, who was, little by little, being consumed by the red energy. He watched as that energy consumed whatever it touched, and Loki knew what he was feeling was magic. Ancient and forgotten magic. Konan groaned as the holder of the Hachibi hit her straight on the chest. The man had more control over the beast inside him than they had expected. Of course, they hadn't been worried since their target was the Jinchuriki of the 2 tails. However, this they didn't expected. A berserk Jinchuriki of the Kyubei, a Sunin, 2 Jonin, and that man, the one that called himself Lie-Smith. Konan stood up ready to start her attack when a hand stopped her. She turned around to see Yahiko besides her, shaking his head. Let's go. Konan frowned, confused. But Yahiko pointed with his head, and Konan turned around to see one of the panes vanished in a rictus of pain covered with green flames. Konan opened her eyes in surprise. That's not possible. And yet, here it is. Come, we will need a new plan. Naruto was completely lost. He couldn't move, but he knew there was something wrong. He looked around and realized he was no longer in the forest, that he could no longer see his friends and the guys attacking Yujito. He was in what seemed to be a sewer. Naruto watched as a red light made contact with his feet, hands, and abdomen. He frowned, moving his hands right in front of his eyes, watching with curious eyes that strange essence. Hello. He may have been young, and some people may believe him stupid, but Naruto had been raised by the god of mischief. He was everything but a fool, and he knew, whatever was happening, he would need to think this out before acting. So, he asked again. Hello. He took a step forward and then another. As he moved, he started feeling warmer and overwhelmed by a sudden presence, something connected with the strange red light. Well, look what the fates had brought to my doorstep. Naruto shivered as he crossed a threshold to a big room with a cage at the other side. He stopped any movement, his hand moving fast to his kunai holster, blue eyes narrowing with a glint of intelligence very few had seen on the 12th-year-old. My jailer has finally come to see its prisoner. The voice was strange, it felt inviting, and yet it held a deep, guttural tone that sent shivers of warning down Naruto's back. There was something old behind the voice, something that spoke of unknown ages. Jailer? Who are you? Come out from the shadows. The creature chuckled, and Naruto heard the heavy body moving until finally the blonde saw him. It was a huge, red fox, his yellowish eyes gleaming with amusement and something else. Naruto gasped when he saw the huge form of the fox. Out of curiosity he moved forward, his dagger and his kunai on each one of his hands. He took in the form of the fox and then on the cage, his eyes falling on top of the seal at the cage's door. Naruto then locked eyes with the fox, tilting his head to the side. "Who are you? Where are we?" The fox pressed his face against the cage, his eyes gleaming maliciously, one of his tails wagging back and forth, his energy coming slowly and engulfing at a still distracted Naruto. "Oh, do not tell me the son of Odin has not told you yet." Naruto changed his expression, it turned from one of curiosity to one of coldness and uncertainty. "How do you know about father? What do you mean by that?" Naruto fixated his dagger, moving into a fighting position. "Speak, fox." Kurama laughed loudly, his laugh echoing in the room. Naruto looked confused but didn't waver as he took in every detail his eyes could catch in the room. The fox stopped laughing, making his tail slid right outside the cage and nearing Naruto. The blonde made his dagger and kunai gleamed with his chakra, a warning for the fox to stop his advances. Kurama did so, amused at the valiant yet futile attempt from Naruto's part to stop and intimidate him. "Oh, no boy, I'm not going to tell you anything, this is something I'm going to enjoy your father telling you." Kurama tilted his head and with a swing of his tail the red energy covered Naruto. "Do ask Loki of Asgard to tell you about the monster parents tell children about in Konoha. Ask him about the Kyuubi no Kitsune and his Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto." Kurama chuckled again at the shocked expression on Naruto's face. "Here, let me show you why people in your pathetic village is afraid of you." Naruto didn't have the time to react as he suddenly felt an unbelievable pain in his body. He screamed, and screamed right after he lost consciousness. Loki felt the slash moving right beside him. He frowned, feeling the magic brushing his armor. There was something strange about this, something he had never felt before. His green eyes lifted to see Naruto engulfed in the red energy, his eyes devoid of any sign of intelligence or understanding. Right now, he was mindless, being dominated by his emotions. "Naruto! Naruto, listen to me." Loki stepped forward, he tilted his head and realized the attention of the blonde was on him. Loki could observe the change in the blonde. There was not a single sign that Naruto recognized him. Loki felt a lump on his throat, and for a second he felt lost. This was the first time Naruto watched him without any emotions in his eyes. He didn't wear the happiness or fondness he used to wear every time he saw the god of mischief. And this fact hurt Loki in ways he never thought possible. "Naruto, listen to me. I need you to hear my voice, concentrate. Do not let this thing dominate you." The crimson Naruto growled and launched himself forward. Loki narrowed his eyes, evading the attack, barely missing another brush from the red magic. The green eyes drifted for a moment and observed as Jiraiya got ready. It was brief, but the movement of the head didn't go unnoticed by Loki, who understood it was time. He stretched his hand and his own magic hit Naruto on the chest. The blonde screamed out in pain, turning wildly ready to attack again. Loki opened up his hand, green light forming ropes that tied around Naruto's limbs. The blonde growled loudly, trying to free his hands, struggling against the bonds. "Jiraiya!" Loki called out to the Sunin, who jumped to join Loki, passing to him a piece of paper with strange markings on it. "Okay, on 3. 1. 2. 3. Both, Loki and Jiraiya ran towards Naruto. Loki stepped on the trunk, jumping behind the blonde and placing the seal on his back on the same spot Jiraiya was placing his fingertips of the seal on Naruto's abdomen. Naruto screamed out. Loki jumped backwards, watching his hand with a frown still on his features. He had gone inside Naruto before, he had seen what lied inside him, but never before had he felt this kind of power. This magic was different, as if something had activated a different trigger. Loki observed with worried eyes the screaming boy who, little by little, let go of the red magic and started recovering his own colors and his own form. Naruto gasped, his eyes closing, falling down. Loki grabbed him, gently touching his forehead and mumbling soft words in a language Jiraiya didn't know. Loki placed Naruto on the ground, his lips curling up the moment he felt the cold still of a sword against his neck. Jiraiya glanced at the person behind Loki. Naruto's teammates had come forward, each one of them surrounding Loki but eyeing Jiraiya with suspicion. B had Yujito in his arms. the young girl sleeping, paled, and still hurt after the attack. Everything was a complete chaos. Loki chuckled. Chaos was his specialty. "Yojao, put that katana down," said Jiraiya, scowling at the young woman. "You have to be kidding me, Jiraiya-sama. Do you know who this guy is? The one who just saved all your lives," replied Jiraiya, signaling Naruto and then Yujito and B. "No, he is the man that murdered the Uchiha clan." B raised an eyebrow, approaching the Konoha group. His eyes, covered by the black glasses, drifted from Naruto then to Loki. The man smiled, shaking his head. "Thor-san, I don't know what happened or how did you find out, but, thank you," said B, ignoring the Konoha ninja and placing Yujito down near where Naruto lied unconscious. Loki shrugged. "It's a long story, but I couldn't allow Akatsuki to take Yujito-san. Naruto would never forgive me." Yojao gasped when the man in front of her disappeared, only to appear behind her. She was shocked when it was her, the one feeling the cold blade against her neck. Shin and Sai fainted forward, but a twirl of Loki's hand made them sit on the ground. Both of them, startled, tried to stand up only to obtain the same result. "Please, Yujito-san, my intentions are, well, let's just say I have come here to prevent some programmed deaths and not to execute them." Yojao looked out of the corner of her eye, the mocking smile on adorning the face of the Asgardian. "You are a murderer," she spat, then turned her eyes to Jiraiya. "And you are an accomplice." "I didn't know about the massacre until right after it happened," replied Jiraiya, who kneeled down and started examining Naruto. "If I had known something, well, there was nothing I could have done actually." Yojao went to speak when the blade pressed harder against her skin. "Please, Yojao-san, everything has an explanation. However, right now my priority is Naruto's and Yujito's well-being. If you insist on being a problem, then I will feel inclined to deal with you accordingly." Yojao was a seasoned fighter. She had started her career as a ninja at a very young age. She had made her way up the different positions with determination and ability. She was good. She was excellent at what she did. She wasn't part of the Umbu for nothing, and she hadn't been a hunter ninja just for nothing either. She had faced many enemies. Death had been right in front of her on several occasions. But this was the first time she felt a primal fear inside her. It wasn't the fact she had a knife on her throat, or the man behind her. It was his voice. There was something different in his voice. And suddenly, Yojao felt herself agreeing. She gulped, humiliate. She turned around and her eyes locked with those belonging to the man Jiraiya seemed to know pretty well. His emerald eyes were cold, sharp, with a strange intelligence in them. "Who are you?" she asked, to which Loki merely gave her a half smirk. The man then turned around and his whole demeanor changed. He became soft and warm. His hands maneuvered swiftly. There was a green light coming from his fingertips, with his hands mapping out Naruto's body. Loki started whispering the enchantments he had learned from EIR back when he was but a teen, eager to please and to make his father proud. Loki buried his thoughts, focusing his energy in trying to find everything was normal in Naruto. He is okay but tired. He feels weak, so he would probably sleep until tomorrow. Jiraiya shrugged, eyeing Yojao. "We don't have to hurry. We can explain, Sensei. I found you guys and we got delay," he said, shrugging. Shin and Sai eyed each other. Sai was frowning, wondering just what exactly was happening. "Jiraiya-sama." "Look, Yojao," Jiraiya silenced her. "The truth is, after what you have witnessed, well, you and your team would have to promise to be quieted about everything." You are asking us to commit treason?" asked Sai, puzzled. "Treason? No, I'm asking you to be good friends and teachers and don't tell anything for Naruto's sake." Loki ignored the conversation, focusing his attention on Yujito. B stood beside them with his arms crossed. "So, you're the infamous Lie Smith? The one who murdered the whole Uchiha clan?" Loki snorted, with his hands drifting around Yujito's body. "You could say that. But, you're also Thor, Naruto's father." Loki tensed up, taking a deep breath. Hearing those words made his blood boil. "As a matter of speaking, yes, I am." B nodded, shrugging. "How is she?" Loki frowned, centering his attention on the wound made by the sword. "She is badly wounded. Not only did they pierce her with a blade, but whatever they were trying to do affect her body. She is tired and would need a long rest." B sat down letting out a heavy sigh. We've heard about them. Akatsuki, we never thought they would dare to approach me or Yujito since we seemed to be the only Jinchuriki capable of manipulating the Biju. Akatsuki thought she would be vulnerable. They sent their best people to try and capture her. Said Loki, finishing his healing on the young woman. He lifted his face to look at B. They will attack again, and next time they may be successful. Losing Yujito would destroy Naruto. I didn't know Naruto was a Jinchuriki. Loki snorted. Yes, you knew it. If not because someone told you, then because your own demon must have told you about it. B tilted his head, trying to read Loki but incapable to do so. In the end he shrugged and nodded. You're right. Yojao watched Loki, then turned to Jiraiya, the son, and shrugged before speaking. If you doubt him, it's okay. But don't question his loyalty and affection towards Naruto. Loki turned around, sitting on the ground. Jiraiya is quite right, Yojao-san. Naruto is the only one holding me back from either erasing your memories or just killing you. Why don't we set a fire and prepare for the night? This too won't move until tomorrow morning. Yojao clenched her fists, glaring daggers at the black-haired man. Jiraiya shook his head before asking Shin and Sai to help him out. B merely watched. This was something his brother would be pretty interested in knowing about. Naruto woke up to a peculiar scene. He was sweating with the images of the past still fresh in his mind. He could feel the pain and sorrow coming from the villagers, from the ninja that had fallen the day the Kyuubi had attacked. His hand went right towards his abdomen, the place where the fourth Hokage had placed the seal. His eyes stung with unshed tears. The voice filled with hatred coming from some villagers, the comments he had overheard, the rejection, and the looks, everything made sense now. Naruto. Yujito approached him with an uncertain look on her face. Her eyes took in the blonde falling on the headband he was wearing on his forehead. Naruto stared at her, giving the girl a weak smile. Yujito-chan, you're okay? He stood up. Yujito returned the smile, nodding. Your father healed me. Naruto tensed up. Lifting his blue eyes, he found those of Loki looking back at him. He clenched his jaw, realizing Loki was there in front of his teammates and Yojao, as well as Yujito and B. The god of mischief felt his lips quirked up in half-smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Naruto took a step forward, watching as Shin evaded his stare, as Sai looked at him intently. He realized Yojao had a worried semblance, and Yujito along with B were looking at him knowingly. The blonde shook his head and stood in front of Loki, clenching his teeth, turning his head to the side. Why didn't you tell me? Naruto. Yojao took a step forward, but Naruto lifted his head with tears in his eyes and anger written all over his face. Why didn't you tell me? Loki flinched, a flashback of him screaming at Odin in Asgard the moment he found out about his origins. Why didn't he say anything about the Kyuubi to Naruto? What had happened for Naruto to be this angry? Naruto was looking at him with pain and disappointment. He looked so betrayed it made Loki regret some of his decisions. The atmosphere around them was tense. Shin and Sai looked at each other, never before having seen Naruto in such a state. Yojao couldn't even wrap her mind around what was happening. She needed answers, because this situation was turning out to be more complicated than she cared to admit. Only Jiraiya and B seemed to actually know and understand the tension between Loki and Naruto. Yujito for her part stood behind Naruto with a sad look of realization on her face. Why didn't you tell me I was a monster? Naruto gulped, shaking his head. Why didn't you tell me the reason people on my village hate me was because I house a monster inside me? That I could lose control. That this power was here. Loki opened his mouth, frowning when he realized he didn't have any words to explain to Naruto. He didn't have any answers. Naruto felt his tears rolling down and he wiped them furiously, taking a step away from Loki. What am I? What the hell am I? And Loki felt déjà vu all over again. He remembered the question, he remembered the circumstances, and then suddenly a part of him, the intelligent, more analytic part of him, understood. You are my son. He replied in a soft voice. And you are a Jinchuriki. You're not a monster, Naruto, but the power inside you may lead you to become one. Loki had the sudden uncontrollable need to run. He found himself trapped in a situation he was not familiar with. Loki was familiar with mischief and lies, he was familiar with deception and planning. But he was not familiar with this kind of situations. He didn't know how to approach Naruto, he never did with Fenrir, and he regretted it to this day. He only knew the love of his mother, the words of the woman who would guide him in the moments he felt left aside. Ignored. Was this how Odin had felt when Loki found out about his true origins? Was Odin so lost to deal with Loki the way Loki was feeling about Naruto right now? The god of mischief watched with morbid fascination as Naruto pointed an accusing finger at him. The boy was trembling, sweating as if trying to grasp whatever was on his mind, trying to understand what Loki had just said. Naruto looked betrayed, he lifted his blue eyes and with a broken voice he spoke to Loki. "I hate you." Those words left innocent lips, filled with hurt and disappointment. Naruto heard himself, he opened his eyes in realization and was ready to run away when Loki stopped him. His hands closed gently around his shoulders as he leaned forward, making sure Naruto was looking at him. Loki knew for experience his face, Thor's face, would be open, filled with emotions in other circumstances the god of mischief would never show. He opened his mouth and closed it, thinking over what to say to the child that had come to mean so much in so little time. Loki remembered himself, he remembered his brother, and finally he remembered his father and his mother. "You are no longer a child, Naruto." No one of the presents seemed overly eager to interrupt the sudden intimate moment. Yojao watched with fascination the resemblance from one blonde to the other, how much Naruto was trying to hide but was incapable to do so. She watched the man they had identified as Lee Smith, the murderer of a whole clan. This was not something she was ready to face. Naruto for his part could not help but look Loki back, to try and hold his tears, to stop those memories, those thoughts the Kyuubi had put on him, and try to listen to the man he had come to love as a father. "And yet, I can't help but to treat you like one. To make sure you can live what little of your childhood you have left." Loki sighed, his eyes turning to his right as memories of his own invaded his mind. "I can't help but see the boy I saved once, innocent and corrupt at the same time. The look in your eyes was a familiar one, something no child should wear so early in his life." Naruto sobbed, looking down with shame. "I saw them. I could hear them. He made me see and feel everything. I'm a monster." "You are not a monster." The force behind the words and the sudden coldness in his voice was what made Naruto look up. Loki was staring back at Naruto with something strange gleaming in his eyes. "You are not a monster, Naruto. What happened with Kurama is not your fault. He isn't you and you are not him. I thought I still have time," said Loki, straightened himself up, glancing back at Jiraiya. "But, apparently, this Akatsuki is already on the move and you just meet with the Biju inside you. If I'm not him, then why?" started Naruto, but he went silent, nodding around him. The destruction was still evident, there were still two bodies of the strange men he had been fighting. "How could I? It's the seal. It's supposed to work in a way the chakra from the Kyuubi starts leaking into your own chakra system," replied Jiraiya. "However, too much of the Kyuubi's chakra could make you lose your consciousness, overall if you are being guided by strong emotions. Bijus are intelligent beings, if you give them the chance to take over they would take it." Naruto nodded before turning to Loki. "You lie to me?" "I did." "You use me?" The last sentence was said with a hint of a question in it. Loki hesitated, tilting his head. He answered, "Yes and no." Loki pursed his lips before continuing, "What I did may have started as a lie and manipulation, but it ended up with one single truth, and that was you became blood of my blood. My kin." Naruto felt relief wash over him, he gave a short nod. "I'm still angry with you." Loki felt his lips quirk upwards, his eyes gleaming with warmth and relief. "I know." Naruto simply shrugged, and for the first time he took in his surroundings, finally his mind catching up with the people around them. As he allowed his blue eyes swept around the scene, he couldn't shake the memories the Kyuubi had provided to him while unconscious. He couldn't help but remember every detail, every deed, every look of hatred and fear. And, Naruto couldn't forget the Kyuubi's words. "In the end, young Naruto, your life force and mine would join together, and then you will become the monster everyone is afraid of. Then, you will finally understand the joy of blood and fear." He didn't want to. That wasn't what he was looking for. He had forged some real friendships, he had tried really hard to make people notice him, to perhaps love him. Naruto didn't want to become a monster, he didn't want any kind of power that may take his chance of being accepted. A weapon. A powerful weapon the Asgardian would know how to use. Naruto shook his head and smiled weakly at his teammates and Yojao. He knew something else was at stake here. He knew there were some truths left aside for the sake of the current events. For now, he would believe Loki, he wasn't a monster. And, at the end of the day he would reign over the Kyuubi and his power would be Naruto's and he would not allow Kurama to take over and cause any harm. So, what exactly happened? He asked, smiling sheepishly at Yojao, who merely narrowed her eyes at him and the man behind Naruto. That is an excellent question, I would like answer right away. Naruto looked over at Yojao, Sai, and Shin, then back at Loki and Jiraiya. He pleaded with his eyes for a reasonable explanation. Loki rolled his eyes and tilted his head in approval. This was going to be a long talk. All of them were getting ready to go back. Naruto didn't dare to look back to his team. He sighed, knowing Yojao was still doubtful, that Sai and Shin would have questions of their own, but Naruto was anxious to know if even after all of this they would still want him. The blonde turned startled when a hand closed around his elbow. Yujito smiled at him, lowering her head and moving closer. So, Konoha, eh? I mean, we did suspect, but I was hoping you still could join Kumogakuer. Yeah, sorry I never say anything. Naruto grinned at the young girl in front of him. But, well, at least I can't stop talking in so much riddles. How is your arm? Yujito looked at her bandaged arm, shrugging. Healing. Nabai would make sure I'm completely healed by the time we get home. Naruto nodded, still trying to process the fact he and Yujito were Jinchuriki, trying to process everything that had happened. He tilted his head, looking at Yujito. I think I'm going to be watched pretty closely from now on, so we will see each other sooner than you think, Naruto, said the girl shyly. Don't worry, I think it's better if you fix whatever mess you seem to be in. What do you mean we will see each other sooner? Yojao opened her eyes, surprised. Well, in 8 months is going to be the Chunin exam, in Konoha, actually. Aren't you participating? It was supposed to be a secret. Mumbled Yojao, irritated. She eyed the girl suspiciously. They didn't need to know that yet, so I can consider their participation. Wait, what? The Chunin exams? We're participating in the Chunin exams. Naruto seemed excited at the prospect. It had been almost a year since they became genin. To make the exam would speed up their formation. I said I was considering it, Naruto. I'm still not sure yet. Not after this last days. Yojao sound severed. She lifted an eyebrow when the blonde seemed ready to argue, but Naruto thought better of it. Say goodbye and be ready, we're leaving. Naruto looked downcast, knowing he would have some serious talking to do once he was back in Konoha. He lifted his eyes and found looking into Yujito's ones. The girl smiled shyly at him before leaning in and kissing him on the cheek. Don't worry, I know you will come up with something to convince her. Naruto gave a goofy smile at the young woman, nodding his head. Then we will see each other in 8 months. And then I'll kick your ass to show you just how good I gotten. Naruto chuckled, crossing his arms. We'll see. Until next time, Yujito-chan. Until next time, Naruto-kun. Loki watched from afar with a tiny smile decorating his features. He then turned his green eyes to the Konoha group, feeling wary. They had spoken, explained some basic things. They hadn't convinced Yojao, but at least the woman had agreed to remain silent. For now. Loki knew this wouldn't last, not with the imminent threat coming from Akatsuki. The god of mischief knew he had to think something up, and soon, because he had a really bad feeling about what was happening next. That's it for part 4. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.